On the morning of April 4th, 1972, the peaceful town of Boardman, Ohio, was rocked by a shocking crime. The body of a 12-year-old named Bradley Bellino was found dumped in the trash bin behind Isley's Dairy Store in the Boardman Plaza. The locals were aghast that such a tragedy could occur in their community. Brad had been missing since the night of March 31st, 1972, and it was apparent that he had been subjected to a terrible fate. As the authorities scrambled to make sense of the situation, the one question that echoed in everyone's mind was, who could have done this to an innocent child, and why? Boardman is a vibrant and bustling community located in Mahoning County, Ohio. It boasts of a population of more than 40,000 people, and it is the second largest municipality in the Youngstown-Warren metropolitan area. Boardman is a hub for commercial activity, with a range of restaurants, shops, and businesses that cater to the needs of its residents. The township has a rich history dating back to the early 1800s, and is home to several landmarks that are worth visiting, such as the Boardman Park and the Southern Park Mall. According to statistics, Boardman's crime rate is 21.23 per 1,000 residents during a standard year. And here, our story begins. Bradley Bellino was born on April 7, 1959, to Joseph and Elisa Bellino. He was their fourth child. Brad's parents were overjoyed to welcome him into the world, and he quickly became the light of their lives. Growing up, Brad was the baby of the family, surrounded by his two older brothers and an older sister. Brad's best friend, Don Templeman, remembered him as a young boy who was always looking for the next adventure. He had a thirst for knowledge and a willingness to try anything new. He was very outgoing. We were both risk takers, but he was the one to come up with the risk, and I was the one to go along with it, said Don. Brad and Don were inseparable friends. They always shared a love of adventure, and they were always up for a new challenge. It's not clear when they became friends, but they likely met at Boardman Center Middle School, where they were both students. The two boys frequently rode their bikes around town. They also occasionally hitchhiked, with Brad being the more adventurous of the two in this regard. Near Brad's house, there was a rock and gem shop. Both boys were captivated by rocks and enjoyed examining them, so they visited the shop often. Their shared passion for baseball brought them even closer. When we started playing baseball together, I was the pitcher and he was the catcher, and my dad was the coach, Don said. Over time, it became a regular routine for the two boys to stay over at each other's homes. Brad and his friend lived just 3 miles apart, making it convenient for them to spend time together whenever they pleased. Friday nights typically saw Don heading to Brad's house, from where they would both walk to the nearby cinema. On Saturdays, they switched locations, with the boys spending the night at Don's house in Applewood Acres. They would spend hours playing games and engaging in conversations late into the night. I was more naive, Don said, and he was more worldly because of his older brothers, I think. He would tell me things I didn't know about life. On Sunday mornings, they would join Don's family for church. Afterwards, Don's mother usually offered Brad a ride home. For Don and Brad, these weekends represented a time of pure happiness and friendship. The two friends were wholeheartedly embracing life, relishing their youth and the adventures it offered. However, something unexpected occurred that would change everything. On Friday, March 31, 1972, during the Easter break, 12-year-old Brad and 11-year-old Don spent the day together. That Friday, the two boys embarked on their usual explorations and roamed around town. However, what began as a fun day soon took a disturbing turn when they noticed a brown van following them wherever they went. Initially, they brushed it off as a coincidence, but after spotting the van for the fourth time, their playful mood gave way to fear. Sensing potential danger, they decided to head back to Don's house. It also seemed wise to return home, especially since the sun had started to set. Once they got to Don's place on Teakwood Drive, Brad reached for his phone and dialed home to let his brother know he was staying over. However, a few minutes later, after Brad settled in for what should have been an enjoyable evening, the phone rang. His father Joseph was the caller, and he insisted that he return home immediately. After this unexpected call, Brad had to break the news to Don that he had to leave and go back home. Don's mother was at the grocery store at the time, so she couldn't give Brad a ride home as she often did. Don's father, on the other hand, was bedridden with the flu, leaving Brad with no choice but to make the journey back to his home on McClurg Road on his own. At 7:30 p.m., he said goodbye to his friend and walked out of the house. Don had no idea that would be the last time he would see his best friend alive. There are conflicting reports about the events that occurred after this. However, what is known is that Brad's father Joseph stayed out late that night. When he returned, he was unaware that his son was missing. He assumed Brad had made it back from his friend's house and was peacefully asleep inside. On the other hand, Elisa, Brad's mother, was at work in Cleveland on that fateful day, entirely unaware of the unfolding events back home. The following day was a Saturday, and Joseph slept until noon. But as he began to move around the house after waking up, he quickly realized that something was wrong. Brad was nowhere to be found. With growing concern, he dialed the Templeman's home. He soon learned that Brad had left their house the night before and hadn't been seen since 7:30 p.m. After ending the call, he began searching the neighborhood for Brad, but his efforts proved fruitless. In desperation, he called the Boardman Police Department and reported his son as missing. The word of Brad's disappearance swiftly spread throughout the small town, igniting concern. The news eventually caught the attention of the media, prompting local newspapers to join in the search effort. They published a detailed description of the missing boy, hoping that someone might recognize him. Brad was described as standing 4 feet 8 inches tall and weighing 80 pounds. His most notable features were his blue eyes and a short blonde hair that fell just below his ears. At the time he went missing, he was dressed in blue jeans, a blue ski jacket, and white tennis shoes with black stripes. Upon learning of Brad's disappearance, his first cousin, Tony Dapolito, who was at the time a police officer in Youngstown, joined the search efforts in Boardman. He was reported missing, and we took to the streets, said Tony. Despite the efforts of both the police and the community, it seemed as though Brad had simply vanished without a trace. His disappearance left a profound void in the hearts of his family and friends. On the morning of April 4th, 1972, 4 days after Brad went missing, a body turned up. On that day, Paul Smith, a sanitation worker, was going about his routine trash collection. As he approached a dumpster behind Isserly's dairy store, something caught his eye. The dumpster was partially filled, and he noticed a pair of sneakers sticking out at an odd angle. Upon closer examination, he was horrified to discover the body of a young boy concealed beneath cardboard boxes and discarded store items. His head hung downward, and Paul noticed a belt tightly fastened around his neck. His pants were undone and pulled down below his hip. Paul immediately dialed the police to inform them about what he had found. This grim discovery took place approximately 2 miles down the road from Don's house. When the Boardman police officers finally arrived at the scene, a heavy sense of foreboding washed over them as they peered into the dumpster and spotted the lifeless figure within. It bore a resemblance to the missing boy they had tirelessly searched for, but they needed confirmation. Contacting Tony, who had been assisting in the search, they requested him to identify the body. Tony hurried to the scene, and with a heavy heart, he confirmed that the body in the dumpster was none other than his cousin Brad. Following this confirmation, the body was retrieved from the dumpster and transported to Southside Hospital in Youngstown for autopsy. Meanwhile, Tony was entrusted with the responsibility of breaking the devastating news to Brad's parents. "It was terrible for my Aunt Elisa and the whole family," Tony said. "You never get past it. You hear about things like this, but you never believe it could happen to you or to your family member," he added. After Brad went missing, Don spent the weekend searching for him before the school week resumed. On that Tuesday when Brad's body was found, Don was back in class when he overheard his math teacher conversing with other teachers in the hallway. According to Don, she returned to the classroom and announced that Brad had been found. Don recalled the entire class erupting into cheers and jumping with joy. Then his teacher added the heartbreaking words, "But he's dead." According to Don, the next hour remained a blur for him. He wasn't sure if he had passed out. However, the next thing he could remember was going to the school office and requesting to go home. As Brad's grieving family and friends tried to come to terms with the shock of his tragic death, the results of the autopsy were made public. The coroner's report disclosed that Brad had been strangled to death, and his body had been violated. The report also indicated that Brad had passed away at 9 p.m. on Saturday, April 1st, more than 24 hours after he was last seen alive. These distressing details from the report only compounded the heartbreak and despair felt by Brad's loved ones. After this, an investigation began to find out who was responsible. Many questions remained unanswered. If the coroner's report was correct, what happened to Brad between 7:30 p.m. on Friday and his time of death at 9 p.m. on Saturday? There was approximately a 26-hour gap with no explanation, leaving the unsettling possibility of either an undisclosed location where Brad was kept, or the existence of a second crime scene besides the dumpster. There was also a question about when Brad was last spotted. Initial newspaper reports claimed he was seen on Saturday afternoon in several places, playing basketball near Don's house on Matthews Road, at the Southern Park Mall, and at the Dairy Queen near North Lima. However, later reports cast doubts on these sightings, suggesting witnesses might have actually seen Brad at those places on Friday. This confusion likely arose because it was a holiday with no school, making it easy for people to mix up the days. Don himself would later assert that the reports of Brad being seen on Saturday couldn't be accurate. As part of the investigation, Don explained that the police took him and his dad to the station. There, they presented him with Brad's clothing and asked if it was what Brad had worn when he had left Don's house. Don confirmed that it was. Then they showed Don the belt discovered around Brad's neck and inquired if it belonged to Brad. Don confirmed that it did. Don couldn't get the memory of the brown van they had encountered on the day Brad disappeared out of his mind. He believed that this suspicious vehicle was somehow linked to his best friend's tragic death. "I think whoever was in that van waited until he was in a dark spot and took him," Don said. Police later mentioned that they received numerous reports about hundreds of vehicles potentially linked to Brad's murder, including an orange Corvette. However, none of these tips led to any substantial leads. As the investigation into Brad's murder continued, the community rallied together to bid him farewell at his funeral. Don was among the attendees, and the event was so packed that there was barely standing room. It seemed like every kid from school, their parents, and even the town's teachers showed up. Following this heartbreaking event, Don's once blissful childhood came to an abrupt end, and life took on an entirely new and challenging shape. "I was very much more cautious. You thought everybody was out to get you. I became very paranoid," Don said. In June 1972, just 2 months after Brad's tragic death, Don's parents decided to leave Boardman and relocate to Tennessee. They were eager to distance their family from a town they considered unsafe for their children, and one that held too many painful memories. For a long time, Don's mother carried a heavy burden of guilt. She blamed herself for not being present to drive Brad home on that fateful night he went missing. As time passed, the investigation into Brad's death didn't seem to make much progress. Months turned into years, and despite pursuing many leads and questioning different suspects, the detectives working on the case kept reaching dead ends. With each passing day, the case grew colder, and the chances of finding justice for Brad became dimmer. In 2001, former police chief Jeffrey Patterson of Boardman refused to let Brad's case grow cold. He decided to reopen the investigation. Detectives were sent to the cemetery where Brad was buried, and they carefully exhumed his body to gather DNA evidence. Chief Jeffrey took another significant step by sending Brad's clothing, which had been kept as evidence, to the state's Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation. During examination, forensic scientists made a shocking discovery. They found DNA that didn't belong to Brad. This discovery brought renewed hope to the investigation. In 2007, the former police chief Jeffrey reassigned the case to 2 detectives, Jack Nichols and Bob Rupp. Nichols had grown up in the same neighborhood where Brad went missing and had been just 14 years old when the tragic incident occurred back in 1972. The case had stayed with him all these years, and now he had the opportunity to seek justice for Brad's memory. Nichols and Rupp immediately got to work as soon as the case was handed to them. Their initial task was to go through a vast amount of paperwork and numerous boxes filled with disorganized evidence. It was a daunting challenge, but they were determined to make sense of it all. During their review of the files, they began to notice the recurring names of 7 individuals. These 7 individuals became persons of interest, although there was lack of concrete evidence to label them as suspects. Nevertheless, Nichols and Rupp persisted. They promptly secured search warrants and set to work. Executing the search warrants, they obtained DNA samples from each of the persons of interest. These samples were then sent to the lab for analysis, with the hope of finding a match with the DNA discovered on Brad's clothing. Regrettably, their hopes were dashed as the lab results returned negative. There was no match. This setback returned the detectives to square one. They continued to scrutinize the case files tirelessly, searching for any potential new leads. Unfortunately, despite their relentless efforts, they came up empty-handed. "We had a lot of guesses and speculations, but no solid information," Nichols said. After dedicating years to the case, detectives Nichols and Rupp retired in 2017, and a new team assumed control of the investigation. Leading this new team was the highly experienced Boardman Police Captain Albert Kakasik. As technology advanced, it offered new possibilities for solving cases like Brad's. And so, in 2018, Boardman police detectives turned to Parabon Nanolabs, a DNA technology company based in Virginia, to help analyze the DNA found on Brad's clothing. Parabon provided the Boardman police with a profile, suggesting they were likely searching for a man of European descent, with fair or very fair skin, freckles, brown or hazel eyes, and black or brown hair. Parabon then used familial DNA to narrow down the list of potential suspects to a group of individuals who shared certain physical characteristics, or a similar family background. Over the next 4 years, detectives worked relentlessly, gathering DNA samples from people identified by Parabon as having possible family connections to the unknown suspect. The results of those DNA tests helped them focus their search on specific branches of the extended family tree, while also ruling out others. In the end, with the assistance of DNA tests, they honed in on a man named Joseph Norman Hill. Detectives went to great lengths to locate a relative of Hill's and obtain DNA samples for examination. Finally, the results came back, indicating a 98.2% likelihood that the DNA found on Brad's clothing belonged to Hill. The detectives had finally cracked the case and identified the responsible individual. However, a significant setback arose. Hill, the man identified through DNA testing, was no longer alive. He had lost his battle with cancer in 2019 and passed away at the age of 79. And to complicate matters, his body had been cremated. This unfortunate turn of events left detectives unable to conduct further tests on Hill's remains to confirm his involvement. As the detectives looked into Joseph Norman Hill's life, they encountered a lack of readily available information. His wife had passed away in 1993, and he had very few family connections, which limited the details they could uncover. However, their investigation revealed that at the time of the murder, Hill was 32 years old and was residing on Shadyside Drive in Boardman. He worked as a truck driver for a bottled water company and relocated to California in 1978 for employment reasons. There was no known link between Hill and Brad's family. Hill's only interaction with the legal system was a 1986 conviction for disorderly conduct and solicitation for inappropriate behavior in Los Angeles. The years-long effort to trace DNA evidence and solve Brad's case cost a total of just over $29,000. However, this expenditure proved to be worthwhile in providing closure to the boy's family. Authorities later concluded that if Hill had still been alive, they would have had strong confidence in presenting the evidence to a grand jury, and this would have resulted in an indictment. On January 24, 2023, during a press conference, Boardman Police Chief Todd Worth revealed that Brad's family had chosen not to make any public statements. They requested privacy to process the new information and continue their healing journey. It was a challenging period for them, and the last thing they needed was media intrusion. But the story doesn't end here. In June of 2023, Hill was shockingly linked to another young boy's death. Back in 1975, 3 years after Brad's abduction and death, 13-year-old David Evans, also from Boardman, went missing about a mile away from the Bellino residence. Evans was reported missing at midnight on January 18, 1975, after his father informed the police that he had been gone for most of the evening. Evans was diabetic, and he had been missing for more than 6 hours. Tragically, he was discovered 4 days later, frozen and lifeless on his back in the backyard of a home on Crestline Place in Boardman. The autopsy revealed that Evans had suffered fractures to his left forearm bones, along with a puncture wound on his lower back. These injuries had been inflicted after his death. Additionally, the report noted multiple abrasions on his face and upper back. Following several DNA tests conducted on clothing retained by the police, a profile found on Evans' underwear matched Hill's DNA, confirming his involvement in this additional murder. The resolution of Brad's murder, as well as that of Evans after over 50 years, shows the dedication and persistence of law enforcement officials, as well as the incredible advancements in DNA technology. While the perpetrator will never face justice in a court of law, the knowledge of his identity and the closure it brings to victims' families and the community is a powerful force. For nearly 4 decades, a chilling shadow hung over the picturesque city of Green Bay, a haunting tale of a murder that defied resolution. The heart-wrenching narrative began with the tragic end of a promising life. The life of 22-year-old Lisa Holstead, a young girl who was murdered on August 12, 1986. For years, the people of Green Bay yearned for justice, haunted by the memory of Lisa's life cut tragically short. The case gradually slipped into the realm of cold and forgotten mysteries, and remained there for years, until it finally reached its resolution in 2023. How did investigators catch the murderer after all these years? Why did this case take so long to get resolved? Green Bay, Wisconsin is a city located on the shores of Lake Michigan and is known for its rich football heritage and the strong devotion of its residents to the Green Bay Packers. The city is known for its football fever. Besides it, the city boasts beautiful scenery and landscapes, and offers nature lovers a peaceful getaway to stay in Green Bay. Green Bay accompanied a community-centered lifestyle, where neighbors share family-like bonds, making it a place where everyone knows each other's names. But even in the warmth of the neighborhood, a heinous murder took place that shattered the whole community in 1986. In the heart of Green Bay, Wisconsin, there lived a young woman, Lisa Holstead. She was born on May 12, 1964, the daughter of Mary and Robert Holstead. Her adolescence turned into a tapestry of love and laughter, and she grew up in a tight-knit community which felt like an extended family. One of Lisa's favorite hobbies was traveling. She spent hours capturing the beauty she encountered through her camera's lens. Her aspirations were not confined to exploration alone. She envisioned opening a cozy bookstore, filled with antique books and sharing her love for literature with fellow bibliophiles. From an early age, Lisa stood out for her keen mind and kind heart. She had an insatiable interest in the area around her. She was always keen to learn and discover. Even as a baby, she was drawn to the natural beauty of her surroundings. The lush Kenyors nature area with its winding trails and abundant wildlife became a place of solace for her. She often spent her time in local shelters, offering comfort to the unlucky. Animals, too, were dear to her, and she often rescued strays, showering them with love. Her relationship with Kenyors nature area became more strong. She spent the majority of her time helping people. No one had anticipated the cruel fate that awaited her, shattering the peace of her beloved safe haven. On an unfortunate day, the 12th of August 1986, Lisa Holstead disappeared in the Kenyors nature area. When she didn't return for a long time, her parents started to get worried. Fear gripped their hearts as they searched for her everywhere, hoping to find something about her. As the sun began to set, the once vibrant community felt the weight of uncertainty that overwhelmed it. The Holsteads, neighbors, and friends were all shocked by the disappearance of their beloved Lisa. As they searched for her with no success, the fear gripped everyone, and they started to anticipate what could have happened to Lisa. There was panic in the air of Green Bay as nobody was getting answers to their questions. They called the Green Bay Police Department, with their shaky voices conveying the urgency of the situation. They didn't know that the tragedy of their beloved Lisa Holstead would set off an intense, decades-long search for answers. On the very same day of August 12th, she was found dead in a marshy area of Kenyors by a passerby. The police were quickly informed and officers from Green Bay Police reached there instantly. A piece of clothing that apparently belonged to Lisa herself could be seen around her neck, proving that she was strangled. It was found out that she was indeed assaulted and killed. Beyond the crime, the heartache of the community was unimaginable. The once inviting Kenyors nature area became a haunting reminder of loss and the terrible truth buried in its foliage. Their shared grief was a testament to Lisa's profound impact on their lives. Detectives from the Green Bay Police Department searched the crime scene. Many questions were already dotting their minds. Who did this? What did they do? And most importantly, why? Detectives investigating the crime scene found Lisa's lifeless body in a muddy area. Early investigations suggested violence and terrible torture. The results of the autopsy revealed the terrible truth. Lisa had been assaulted and strangled. The police department of Green Bay was unable to find the murderer. They collected many items as evidence from the crime site, including DNA, that they hoped would one day help solve the case. The whole community of Green Bay was in a state of anxiety and unease. Roadblocks continued to surface as the investigation intensified. Witness testimonies led to possible suspects, but no one could find out who killed Lisa. They searched for her in every possible way, but the solid alibis thwarted their progress at every turn. Detectives were determined to find the truth behind Lisa's murder. They were searching in every way possible, but couldn't find the right evidence to reach the depths of the case. They stated that, "It doesn't matter. It looks like the killer was trying to throw us off their trail." Detectives never stopped searching for the truth, but despite their relentless efforts, the case eventually went cold. The once-hot pursuit became a mysterious puzzle, and the answers shrouded in darkness. Lisa's memory lingered, a terrifying reminder of a terrible murder and an unsolved crime. For decades, the tragic murder of Lisa Halstead remained unsolved, baffling investigators and the victim's family seeking closure. New hope emerged in 2020 when the search was revived. Detective Rachel Turner, a steady and determined investigator, took a keen interest in the cold case. Her dedication and passion for justice inspired the decision to reopen the case, and it brought a ray of hope to Lisa's loved ones. The team under Detective Turner put much effort into reinvestigating the whole case. They were hopeful of getting a clue which would resolve the case. They thoroughly investigated everything and interviewed the witnesses. All the old evidence was once again opened and investigated. The turning moment emerged when the DNA found at the crime scene was re-examined. But this time, it was done through genetic engineering's latest technology. In April 2022, the DNA sample was sent to Othram Inc., a renowned genetic engineering lab in Texas. The experts in the field started to look into this matter. The DNA was extracted and uploaded to the national database to catch the criminal. Everyone was anxiously waiting to get some good news about the case. A fateful day arrived, and finally, a suspect's name appeared on the database. But there was a problem: that it was not a direct match. Experts at Othram worked hard to trace the whole family tree to find the exact match. Detective Turner expanded her investigation, and surprisingly, she found out that the suspect whose DNA was found visited Green Bay in August of 1986, when Lisa was murdered. His name was Lou Griffin, and he had other cases against him as well. Lou A. Griffin's name had become synonymous with darkness after committing the tragic murder of Lisa. He was born on July 12, 1955, in small-town Illinois and raised by his parents. As he grew older, he expressed conflicting emotions, alternating between moments of charm and unsettling aloofness. Despite his seemingly naive childhood, signs of deeper trouble lurked beneath. Lou's early education seemed promising, but his academic achievements soon gave way to distracted behavior. His youthful rebellion led to petty crime, and over time his involvement with the crime grew. He also got married to a woman named Emily, with whom he had 2 children. As the history of his criminal record was examined, a shocking pattern emerged. It traced back to 1970, when Lou was charged with larceny and assault, signaling the beginning of his dark journey. In the 1980s, he escalated to more serious crimes such as robbery and assault. In 1981, Lou was convicted of second-degree assault, a felony, and he was sent to prison. After serving his sentence, he moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin in the mid-1980s. It was in the summer of 1986 when his most heinous crimes occurred. One unfortunate night, he met 22-year-old Lisa Halstead in a swampy area of the Kenyers Nature Area. Driven by his dark instincts, he assaulted the young woman, strangled her, and left her lifeless. Lou thought he had escaped justice, but when the investigation continued in 2020, the evidence began to unveil against him. The crimes he committed before were documented by investigators. It painted a grim picture of a man who had no respect for human life. After years of relentless investigation and the pursuit of justice, the name Lou A. Griffin finally echoed through the halls of the Green Bay Police Department. He was arrested for the murder of Lisa Holstead. He was charged based on the DNA found at the crime scene. January 15, 2021, was the day when the outrageous criminal Lou was arrested. Police arrested him at his home in Racine, Wisconsin. Faced with the weight of his actions, Lou had no choice but to face the consequences of his crime. As he stood in front of the arresting officers, the gruesome image of Lisa Holstead's lifeless body served as a heartbreaking reminder of the damage he caused. The victim's family, united in the pursuit of justice, finally got a little comfort in knowing the man responsible for their daughter's death is facing law custody. Lou A. Griffin's reign of terror finally came to an end. The Green Bay community, which had been terrified for so long, finally breathed a sigh of relief, knowing their streets were safer with him behind bars. The arrest of Lou A. Griffin wasn't just the end of a cold case. It was a testament to the unwavering dedication of the investigators, the resilience of the victim's family, and the strength of the community. All eyes were on Lou A. Griffin early in the trial. He was detained in the county jail upon his arrest, awaiting the day when he would finally face the repercussions of his horrible deeds. The trial was started on March 27, 2023, where evidence and witnesses from both parties were brought. The lawyer of Lou, Richard Jenkins, was certain that he would be rescued from the court. He added his remarks that there was insufficient evidence against him, and there could be other reasons for the presence of his DNA at the crime scene. On the other side, Lisa's lawyer, District Attorney Sarah Johnson, challenged Richard's claims in court. She presented a long history of Lou's crimes in court. It turned out that Lisa was not the only victim of Lou. Many other people fell prey to this barbaric murderer. The case took another turn. Another witness showed up who was hesitant to come to court before. It brought more strength to Lisa's case. It added in challenging Lou's claims and in pursuing justice for Lisa. Finally, after all the trials, the jury gave its decision on the 18th of July, 2023. Lou was found guilty and charged with first-degree murder. The decision was made considering the pattern of his crimes and the case of Lisa. There was a deep silence when the verdict was read in court. Lou's fate was sealed when he was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Lisa Holstead. The courtroom was filled with mixed emotions: sadness for the loss of life, justice for the victim's family, and satisfaction that finally a heinous criminal is behind bars. After the news of Lou's arrest, people finally felt relieved. They had seen many decades of uncertainty about Lisa's case. Some even lost hope that this case would ever reach closure. But it finally did. It restored the trust of people in the justice system and gave them a sense of peace. Lisa's father, Robert Holstead, was emotional after the court's decision. When journalists asked about his remarks, he said, "The wait was excruciating, but knowing that the man responsible for our daughter's death has finally been held accountable brings some comfort." He was in tears. Even after the court announced the punishment to the criminal, her mother still felt a weight on her chest. She was unable to bring her daughter back. She was gripping Lisa's portrait in her hands and was in tears when she said, "There is no sentence that can fill the void in our hearts. Every day we miss her." The team of detectives and attorney Sarah Johnson all worked hard to bring justice to Lisa. They all stood with smiles as their hard work finally paid off. They were glad of their accomplishment. They restored people's trust in justice and gave a hard lesson to all criminals out there. Detective Graff said, "We hope that this verdict brings some measure of peace to the community." Many media channels interviewed her parents. They remember Lisa by telling many interesting tales of Lisa. They told the media what a kind and caring soul she was. Green Bay welcomed a renewed feeling of finality as the sun sank over the city. The once cold case was no longer a terrifying mystery, but a testament to the persistence of the human spirit. On December 22, 1974, a group of hikers in Tennessee came across a lifeless body while taking a shortcut near the tramway station at Gatlinburg Ski Lodge, newly renamed Ober Mountain Aerial Tramway. The dead body was of a woman who was laying face down on a spread-out cloak near a tree, as though she had been sitting there before her sudden death. The most perplexing aspect is how it took nearly 50 years to determine the identity of a woman known only as Jane Doe, until the body was finally recognized in 2023. As per the early forensic reports, it was revealed that she was approximately 35 years old at the time of her death. What could have happened that led her to this remote spot? Why did it take almost 5 decades to identify this victim? Let's find out. Gatlinburg is located in the east of Tennessee. It is well known as a gateway town surrounded by the breathtaking Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and praised for its breathtaking natural beauty. While Gatlinburg has evolved with time, it preserves its warm, family-friendly environment, albeit being rather pricey. This charming resort-style mountain community is known for its natural beauty, superb shopping, and rich history. Gatlinburg, with a population of about 3,800 people, may appear to be a calm town. Yet, beneath its attractive facade, the place conceals mysteries that have been kept hidden for many years. It happened on a chilly morning in Gatlinburg, Tennessee on December 22, 1974. A group of friends from Georgia decided to go hiking in a rural and rarely traveled location. They decided to take a shortcut to their chalet. Something surprising stopped them in their tracks as they walked down the desolate trail. The remains of a woman were discovered beneath the tramway station at Gatlinburg Ski Lodge. She was lying face down on a spread-out cloak near a tree, as though she had been sitting there before her sudden death. The sight rendered the men who came across it speechless. The situation was terrible, and the remains were in such advanced decay that identifying her appeared impossible. Who was this woman? How did she get here? These thoughts rushed through their heads as they sought to make sense of the shocking finding. The men realized they had to notify the authorities in the face of such a frightening discovery. They made a hurried phone call to the Gatlinburg police, expecting a quick response to investigate this gruesome situation. Former Gatlinburg Police Chief W.B. Ogle and Sergeant J.G. Moore arrived on the scene shortly after. What they discovered was a terrible mystery, a puzzle with no obvious solutions. The dead body was in such a state of decomposition that identification was practically impossible. There were no immediate clues found near her body or in the surrounding region that could reveal her identity or the circumstances of her death. It appeared that the remote area had engulfed this woman, leaving behind only unanswered questions and an unsettling silence. As authorities began their inquiry, they were met with an investigation that seemed to get more complex by the minute. The disturbing find beneath the Gatlinburg Ski Lodge tramway station was a haunting puzzle that would occupy their thoughts and efforts for years to come. When this lifeless body was discovered, her remains indicated that she had died about 2 months before they were discovered, leaving the reason of her death unknown. Since there was no ID on her, this woman was then referred to as Jane Doe by the investigators. Jane Doe was assessed to be between 30 and 45 years old, of white race, and was 5 feet 8 inches tall. She weighed around 140 pounds. Her hair, a blonde-brown combination, was chopped short, and a large portion of it was discovered near her remains. Jane Doe was discovered wearing only short brown men's socks and no shoes. Her coat and sweater were laid neatly beside her. She was dressed in a white button-down sweet tree sweater, extra-large Meyerland Marquis slacks, and a white short-sleeved shirt with yellow flowers. Any jewelry or other personal belongings she may have had with her at the time were not discovered. Authorities went to available resources in the absence of instant identification. Her dental records were available, as was her DNA for prospective future research. Unfortunately, her fingerprints were not accessible, adding to the mystery surrounding her case. Dr. John Hickey, the Sevier County medical examiner, was presented with the difficult challenge of identifying Jane Doe's body. Dr. Hickey sought aid from Dr. William M. Bass, the state forensic anthropologist, since he recognized the complexities of the scenario. They agreed to bring the body to the University of Tennessee Memorial Research Center and Hospital mortuary for an autopsy. The inquiry into Jane Doe's inexplicable death began, and the case was assigned the number 7411. The autopsy was performed in an effort to reveal the cause of her death. Unfortunately, despite the medical professionals' best efforts, the report provided no definitive cause of death. While this discovery dispelled suspicions of foul play, it added to the mystery surrounding Jane Doe's death. The search for this mysterious woman's identity gained momentum in January 1975. Investigators worked tirelessly, sending letters to various police departments and reaching out to neighboring states like South Carolina, Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia. The FBI and TBI were called in for assistance. Despite their best efforts, they came to a disheartening halt, unable to uncover any leads or indications to her identity. The mystery of Jane Doe perplexed investigators for years. They used computer technologies in 2007 to build a composite representation of her face. This amazing reconstruction gave the investigators a glimpse of what she would have looked like in real life. They calculated her height, weight, hair color, and eye color in the hopes that this composite might jog someone's recollection and lead to her identification. However, their expectations were dashed once more when this new lead failed to produce a breakthrough. Unshaken by the ongoing difficulties, researchers investigated a cutting-edge method of identification in 2007. Leveraging National Crime Information Center's dental identification system. Despite this, Jane Doe's identity remained a mystery. The case appeared doomed to go unresolved. The case was reported to the National Missing and Unidentified Person Systems in a final attempt to uncover the truth. Despite decades of continuous investigation, the identity of Jane Doe, known as UP1589, remained a mystery. Serving as a haunting reminder to investigators, of the enduring mysteries that occasionally defy even the most advanced investigative procedures. As a result, this case, like many others, eventually became cold. In 2021, this case was assigned to Detective Cindy Myers of the Gatlinburg Police Department, who had long been troubled by the mystery of the mysterious Jane Doe. Years of relentless investigation had left her wondering if the mystery would ever be solved. However, Detective Myers was aware that technology had improved much since the 1970s, and she was determined to bring the cold case back to life. Detective Myers sought answers from Othram, a specialized laboratory in Texas known for its expertise in forensic genetic genealogy testing. Othram is a corporation based in the United States that specializes in using genetic genealogy to solve cold cases, such as unsolved murders and disappearances. They give tools and methods to law enforcement authorities to determine family links among victims, whether closely or distantly related, by combining short tandem repeat, or STR, and single nucleotide polymorphism, SNP testing. As part of their services, they also provide forensic genome sequencing of DNA. The skeletal remains of Jane Doe were carefully carried to Othram's lab, where a rigorous examination began. Using forensic-grade genome sequencing, Othram's experts developed a comprehensive DNA profile. Othram's genetic genealogy team used the DNA profile to track prospective relatives of Jane Doe. Each lead took them down a winding route through family trees and public records, as they meticulously cobbled together a probable link to the unknown woman. It was a difficult procedure that demanded patience and steadfast focus. Their efforts were rewarded in February of 2023. Othram officials contacted Detective Cindy Myers with shocking news. A potential DNA match for a woman living in Arkansas had been discovered. When they found her, they discovered an astonishing fact. She revealed that her sister had gone missing in August of 1974 and was last seen in Tennessee. With this revelation, a critical piece of the puzzle was put together. A DNA sample was quickly acquired from the woman in Arkansas and submitted for direct comparison with the remains of Jane Doe. As detectives awaited the results, the suspense was apparent. After all these years, the outcome arrived. Jane Doe was positively recognized as Charlotte Roberta Henry, who was only 35 years old when she died. She was the sister of the woman whose DNA sample was acquired for comparison. Charlotte Roberta Henry was born to Paul and Roberta of Tulsa, Oklahoma on January 4, 1939. She had a brother, Paul Henry, while her sister's name is unknown. Not much is known about her early life. She stood at roughly 5'8" and had hazel eyes and blonde-brown hair. Details regarding her marital status and whether or not she had children are unknown. Her family last saw her at her father's burial in April of 1974, which is the only certain fact. All contact with her unexpectedly halted following that tragic event. It wasn't until August of the same year that her family received a letter from her, mailed from 2124 Vinton, Memphis, Tennessee. Little did the family know that this letter would be the last they would get from her. The revelation of Jane Doe's identity being confirmed as Charlotte Roberta Henry was a triumphant moment for the authorities that never faltered in their determination to obtain answers. They finally got closure on this long-running case. While the cause of Charlotte's death and the circumstances surrounding her demise remain unknown, her identification puts an end to a nearly 50-year-old mystery. Police Chief Randy Brackens applauds the Gatlinburg Police Department's investigative division for their steadfast dedication in the pursuit of this case. A number of detectives in our investigative division have worked this case through the years to determine the identity of Miss Henry. Although the revelation has a tragic ending, it brings Miss Henry's sister much-needed peace after nearly 5 decades of uncertainty about her sister's fate. The investigators' perseverance has now provided the family with answers, providing peace amongst the ongoing tragedy of the situation. Although one cannot say that justice was done to this poor victim, at least something that seemed impossible finally came to light, putting this tragic case to an end.
So the Boulder County Sheriff's Office wants to know who killed Angela Wilds, who disappeared 16 years ago. Hikers found her remains in a shallow grave near Lyons, and the only object detectives found with her body was a cross ring.
On June 4th, 2006, a chilling discovery was made in the South St. Vrain Canyon of Colorado. Hikers stumbled upon a decomposed body not far from the town of Lyons. The scene painted a mysterious picture. The woman's remains seemed to have been dragged out from a shallow grave, most likely by some wild animal. Nearby, neatly folded, were a pair of yellow ski pants, a sleeping bag, and a pillow with its case. The state of decomposition made it impossible to identify her using fingerprints. But one clue was left behind: a lone cross ring found with her. Who was this woman? And what tragic events could have led to her death? Boulder County, located in Colorado, boasts a diverse population that thrives amidst its scenic beauty. The region is renowned for its blend of recreational and historic sites, offering residents a balanced lifestyle. Living here means enjoying outdoor activities, from hiking trails to visiting age-old landmarks. The community is warm, welcoming, and known for its camaraderie. However, like many places, Boulder County isn't without its challenges. The crime rate, while generally low, has had its dark moments. One such incident is the Angela Wilds cold case of June 4, 2006. A mystery that remained unsolved for over a decade. On a seemingly ordinary day, June 4, 2006, a group of hikers set out to explore the picturesque trails near Lyons in the South St. Vrain Canyon of Colorado. Little did they know that their trek would lead them to a discovery that would baffle the local community and law enforcement for years to come. As they ventured deeper into the canyon, they stumbled upon a disturbing sight: a decomposing body not far from the trail. The serene beauty of the canyon was suddenly overshadowed by the grim reality of what lay before them. The hikers immediately alerted the authorities, who arrived promptly to investigate the scene. Upon closer examination, deputies and detectives deduced that the remains belonged to a female. The body's position and surroundings suggested that it had been initially buried in a shallow grave, only to be later unearthed by some wild animal, perhaps drawn by the scent. Not far from the grave, neatly arranged, were personal belongings: a pair of yellow ski pants, a sleeping bag, a pillow and its matching pillowcase. These items, seemingly untouched by the elements, painted a haunting picture of the final moments before the woman's demise. The advanced state of decomposition posed a significant challenge for the investigators. Traditional methods of identification, such as fingerprint analysis, proved futile. The only clue that might hint at the woman's identity was a cross ring found with the body. This piece of jewelry, possibly of sentimental value, became a focal point in the investigation. The sheriff's office, determined to uncover the truth, contacted the coroner's office for assistance. However, the body's condition made it difficult to ascertain the exact cause of death. While there were no visible signs of trauma like a gunshot, stab wounds, or broken bones, the possibility of foul play loomed large. The absence of such injuries didn't rule out other sinister means, such as strangulation, which the coroner couldn't dismiss given the state of the remains. Adding to the mystery was the discovery of a white powdery substance around the grave and on the body. Lab tests identified it as calcium oxide, commonly known as quicklime. When in contact with moisture, this compound produces heat and can accelerate decomposition. Approximately 50 pounds of this substance covered the body and permeated the soil around the grave to a depth of about 14 inches. Its presence suggested a calculated effort to expedite the decomposition process, further pointing towards a deliberate act. The use of quicklime, the neatly folded belongings, and the shallow grave all indicated a hasty attempt to conceal the crime. While the body bore signs of animal predation, the lack of other evident injuries made the case even more perplexing. The community was left with numerous questions. Who was this woman? Why was she in the South St. Vrain Canyon? And most importantly, who would want to harm her? The discovery of the body in the South St. Vrain Canyon set the Boulder County Sheriff's Office into immediate action. Recognizing the gravity of the situation and the need for public assistance, they reached out, urging anyone with information to come forward. The response was overwhelming. Tips poured in, many pointing towards missing women from various parts of the country. The sheer volume of these tips painted a somber picture, highlighting the alarming number of women who had gone missing, not just in the metro area, but nationwide. Jason Ulkers, a dedicated officer with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office, reflected on the investigation's emotional toll. He spoke of the heart-wrenching reality of countless missing women and the anguish their families endured waiting for answers. Each tip was a potential lead, a possible end to a family's nightmare. The sheriff's office meticulously followed up on every name, leaving no stone unturned. The sheriff's office collaborated with various agencies to aid in their investigation. They tapped into resources from the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The collective effort aimed to cross-reference details and narrow down the list of potential identities for the victim. Then, in October 2006, a breakthrough came. A woman approached the Longmont Police Department with her concerning report. She hadn't seen her friend, whom she identified as Angela Wilds, for an extended period. Her description of Angela bore striking similarities to the body found in the canyon. She even mentioned a distinctive ring Angela often wore, which matched the cross ring found with the remains. With this lead, investigators delved deeper into Angela Wilds' background. They discovered that Angela had connections to the Longmont area. The physical description provided by the friend aligned with the body's characteristics, further solidifying the potential match. To confirm the identity, the sheriff's office turned to science. In November 2006, they conducted a DNA analysis. They sought definitive proof by comparing rib bones from the remains with samples from 4 of Angela's sisters. The results were conclusive. The body found in the South St. Vrain Canyon was indeed that of 38-year-old Angela Wilds from the Longmont, Colorado area. Angela Josephine Wilds, also known as Angela J. Garcia, was born on February 28, 1968. While the exact details of her birthplace and her parents remain shrouded in mystery, what's undeniable is the indelible mark she left on those who knew her. Angela resided at 214 East 8th Avenue, Longmont, Colorado, 80504, a place she called home. Those who dialed 970-339-3803 would be greeted by her voice, a testament to her presence in the community. One of her sisters, Tammy Benson, fondly remembered Angela. In her words, Angela was a beacon of love and kindness. She had the innate ability to light up a room with her warmth and genuine care for others. It wasn't just her family that felt this way. Her neighbors and friends in Longmont would often speak of her generous spirit and her infectious laughter. Angela had dreams, aspirations, and passions like all of us. She was unique in her own way, with quirks and interests that set her apart. While the specifics of her passion remain personal, it's evident that she lived her life with a zest that was contagious. She believed in cherishing the present, making the most of every moment, and spreading love wherever she went. Living a transient lifestyle, Angela didn't have a fixed address or a regular job. Instead, she relied on the kindness of friends, often sleeping on their couches. This nomadic way of life made piecing together her last days a challenging task for investigators. However, life is unpredictable. No one in Longmont, especially her loved ones, could have foreseen the tragic turn of events that June of 2006. Angela, at the age of 38, met an untimely end. As they delved deeper into Angela's life, they interviewed a myriad of people she had interacted with, family, friends, and acquaintances. Yet the mystery surrounding her final days remained. A significant clue emerged when DNA analysis of the ski pants found at the crime scene was confirmed to belong to Angela. But there was more. The same items also bore DNA traces from an unidentified male. Fast forward to January 22, 2009, 3 years after her remains were found. Another significant development occurred. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation linked a man named John Angerer to the crime scene through DNA evidence. With this lead, investigators began to explore any potential relationship between Angela and Angerer. Their inquiries revealed that several individuals had spotted the two together in the latter part of 2005 and early 2006. In August 2009, Angerer was located and interviewed by detectives in Anchorage, Alaska. He recounted his travels in early 2006, mentioning his attendance at a dive school in Texas, followed by a stint in Colorado, living in places like Canyon City, Longmont, and Monte Vista. By August, he had relocated to Alaska. However, when shown Angela's photo and questioned about her, Angerer claimed no knowledge of her. He reiterated this stance in a subsequent interview with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office in September, even denying any familiarity with the South St. Vrain area, where Angela's body was discovered. Yet, contradicting his statements, family members reported Angerer's frequent visits to a cave in the South St. Vrain area. He was known to hike and camp around this cave just a few miles from Lyons. His sister even recalled an instance where she dropped him off in the very vicinity where Angela's remains would later be unearthed. To solidify the connection, a buccal swab from Angerer was taken and compared to the DNA found at the crime scene. The results were telling. Angerer's DNA was the primary profile on the pillowcase and inside the sleeping bag. John Michael Angerer, born on July 28, 1969, remains an enigmatic figure in the Angela Wilds cold case as of 2023. While specific details about his early life, such as his parents' names and birthplace, remain undisclosed, it's evident that Angerer is more than just a name in a case file. Though much of Angerer's personal history, including his childhood behaviors, education, and family life, hasn't been shared to the public, it's crucial to remember that he didn't exist in isolation. His actions, especially those leading up to his involvement in the Angela Wilds case, were likely influenced by a myriad of personal struggles and experiences. As for his criminal history, the specifics of his past crimes, if any, remain under wraps. The investigative journey began when an arrest warrant was drafted for Angerer in 2010. At that time, he was serving time in an Alaskan prison for a probation violation. The Fort Collins, Coloradoan reported that despite the mounting evidence, a judge dismissed the case after a preliminary hearing in July of 2010. The reason? Insufficient evidence to tie Angerer directly to the crime. However, the narrative took a turn when several acquaintances described Angerer's volatile nature. Disturbingly, some even recounted instances where he tried to strangle his ex-girlfriends. The name Angela seemed to trigger an intense rage in him. In 2015, a pathologist reviewed the case and, considering the circumstances, suggested that Angela's life was likely taken through asphyxiation. This revelation became even more significant given Angerer's alleged history of strangulation. Fast forward to 2023, and the narrative took another twist. An ex-girlfriend of Angerer, who had previously denied any violent behavior from him, revealed that Angerer had strangled her multiple times during their relationship. This revelation, and other witness testimonies and evidence, painted a grim picture of Angerer's involvement. Witnesses placed both Angerer and Angela at the Bar L Motel in Longmont, Colorado, around the time of the crime. Motel records confirmed their stay, adding another piece to the puzzle. With this mounting evidence, authorities presented their findings to a grand jury in February of 2023. The outcome? An indictment against John Angerer. On March 9, 2023, the saga reached a pivotal moment. John Michael Angerer, now 53, was arrested in Anchorage, Alaska, in connection with Angela Josephine Wilds' case. His bond was set at a staggering $1 million. Angela Wilds' cold case has been a journey of persistence, resilience, and an unwavering pursuit of justice. Boulder County Sheriff Curtis Johnson reflected on the progress made, remarking, "I am glad that we were able to move our investigation into the case of Angela Wilds forward. I take immense pride in our detectives, who remained steadfast, refusing to let this cold case go. Angela's family has been in anticipation for this day, and as we proceed, they remain at the forefront of our thoughts." The case progression has brought hope for Angela's family and opened up new avenues of investigation. There's an ongoing inquiry into whether John Angerer might have been involved in other unsolved crimes in Colorado and Alaska. The authorities have urged the public to come forward with any information about the case, Angela, or John Angerer. Detective Mike McKinley of the Boulder County Sheriff's Office is the point contact, reachable at 303-441-4692. Tammy Benson, Angela's sister, has been a pillar of strength throughout this ordeal. She voiced her hopes for the upcoming trial, saying, "I hope this time the courts, the judge, and everyone involved truly listens. It's time for him to face the consequences of his actions." Tammy's memories of her sister are filled with warmth, recalling Angela as a loving and kind soul. The decision to charge Angerer for the second time was a significant moment for her, feeling as if the prosecutors had finally answered her prayers.
On Saturday, April 27, 1985, Mildred Matheny went missing. Someone traveling on Old Indiantown Road and 125th Avenue North in Jupiter discovered Mildred naked and motionless on the dirt road and called the authorities.
Mildred Matheny, a 78-year-old woman suffering from Alzheimer's disease, wandered out of her Lake Worth Beach, Florida house on April 7, 1985, and into the car of a stranger. Tragically, this harmless excursion led to her demise. Later that day, she was found battered and naked on an undeveloped dirt road, 30 miles away from her home, and succumbed to her injuries 11 days later. For nearly 40 years, the identity of Mildred's assailant and murderer remained a mystery, until a breakthrough leading to the conviction. The question is, how was the case solved after almost 4 decades? Who could have perpetrated such a wicked and horrifying crime? The lovely city of Lake Worth Beach is located in east-central Palm Beach County, Florida. Its name derives from the Lake Worth Lagoon. With a population of around 42,000, it is only 64 miles north of bustling Miami. This coastal haven is situated south of West Palm Beach, southeast of Lake Clark Shores, east of Palm Springs, and north of Lantana. Within the enormous Miami metropolitan area, Lake Worth Beach stands out as a distinct center of creativity and culture. Here, vibrant expressions of visual arts, experimental music, dance, and theater thrive. The core of the community is one of familiarity, with neighbors knowing one another by name. The streets are safe, similar to a place where unlocked doors are a sign of trust. However, in 1985, a tragedy occurred even in the midst of such a warm setting that left a wound on the heart of an otherwise peaceful community. Mildred Matheny was born in Wilmar, Arkansas on February 28, 1907, as the second of Jess and Margaret Warren's 6 cherished children. Her youth, however, was marked by tragedy. When Mildred was only 8, her father suffered a heart attack and died at the age of 37, leaving behind a heartbroken widow, Margaret, with the daunting burden of raising their 6 small children all on her own. Mildred began a career that would define much of her life as she entered adulthood. She dedicated herself to the area of psychiatric nursing for more than 4 decades, where her compassion and caring touched the lives of many. Her own family expanded when she married Guy Harmon Matheny, and they welcomed a son named Gary into the world. Life, on the other hand, had its share of heartbreaks. Mildred became a widow at the age of 51, when her husband Guy died in 1958. To earn a living, Mildred worked as a psychiatric nurse in a mental facility in Little Rock for nearly 4 decades, with unyielding determination. Later, after her husband's death, Mildred left her Arkansas origins behind and moved to Palm Beach County, Florida, in search of consolation in its warm embrace. Gladys Nolan, Mildred's 75-year-old sister, provided companionship for the widow, who had weathered life's storms. Their home was located on the 1300 block of Crestwood Boulevard in Lake Worth Beach. Her journey had been defined by a life of service. She not only cared for her ailing brother as his mental health worsened, but she also faced her own issues as she approached her 70s. These fights brought her to her sister's house in Lake Worth, where a new chapter of her life began. The charm of Florida's beautiful coastlines beckoned, and her son and grandkids supported her brave decision to relocate. However, the change was not without its difficulties. The transfer put her in foreign territory, and dementia distorted her judgment. Because of this, she was hesitant to go outside without a trustworthy partner. The possibility of visits from her beloved grandkids filled her with optimism and enthusiasm as she settled into her new Floridian home alongside Gladys. In 1985, Mildred Matheny, who had been suffering from dementia, left her home in the tranquil enclave of Lake Worth Beach, Florida. Mildred Matheny, the specs-wearing grandma, vanished from her home in Lake Worth, Florida on that fateful day, April 27, 1985. It was around 4:30 p.m. when she vanished into thin air. She left her house around 3:30 p.m., dressed in a shirt draped over pajamas, completely oblivious of the impending disaster. After an agonizing hour, the alarm was sounded, and she was formally reported missing. A passerby came across her unconscious, injured, uncovered body. That led to the start of an investigation. The unpaved road, now polluted with her blood-stained dentures and discarded garments, bore evidence to her ordeal. The authorities were swiftly notified, and the investigation was launched. She was discovered knocked out, naked and injured on a secluded dirt road 7 hours after she went missing, approximately 25 miles from where she was last seen. They rushed her to Juniper Medical Center, where she was examined by a brain surgeon due to a severe head injury. Her clothes were strewn about, and her dentures, which were stained with blood, were found on the road. The lady was bleeding profusely from her head and face, as if she had been hit severely. Her neighbors said they saw her strolling down the street in her pajamas at around 3:30 p.m., but no one witnessed her being abducted. Matheny died 11 days later as a result of her injuries, particularly the severe blow to her head. It was heartbreaking that she had been mercilessly attacked. Because she had been harmed in such a horrific manner, the nurses at the hospital performed an assault test. The sheriff's office would not release the victim's identity, but news from 1985 identified her as Mildred Matheny. The detectives were able to piece everything together. They took swabs from the crime scene, which included a mix of Mildred Matheny's and the attacker's DNA. But because the technology was limited back then, there were no hits found, and so the case went cold. Nobody knew who injured and killed Mildred Matheny for nearly 4 decades. The only thing they had was a little bit of DNA left behind by the attacker. But it was too old for scientists to find out where it originated from for years. The Cold Case Homicide Unit, according to authorities, was vital in solving this case. This detective squad concentrates on unsolved cases from the past. They employed new and improved DNA analysis techniques to link the assault evidence to Lang. A scientist who analyzed evidence from the Palm Beach County Police Station where this occurred had been able to separate the unknown DNA from Matheny's. This was in the year 2021. They then utilized this DNA to create a profile that was then entered into the Florida State Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. The DNA from the assault was linked to DNA from someone named Richard Curtis Lang. He had been 25 years old when he harmed Matheny. To be certain, they needed to obtain a direct sample of his DNA. This meant taking a sample of Lang's saliva to ensure it matched the DNA from the victim. So they obtained special authorization or a warrant to do so. On April 22, 2021, they went to Lang's home in Boynton Beach, Florida, and got a DNA sample from him. Records show that Lang, now 62 years old, had been in significant trouble in 2006 and 2012, and was required to give up his DNA. That's how his DNA ended up in the database. So, after all these years, they finally discovered who killed Mildred Matheny, thanks to advanced technology and astute detective work. According to state and county records, Lang had been in problems with the law numerous times. In 1983 and 1993, he was convicted of aggravated assault. But instead of going to jail both times, he was sentenced to probation. He didn't stop there, though. He was caught with weapons in 2006 and 2012. Despite the fact that these were serious crimes, he did not spend much time in jail for them. He received short sentences, which means he did not spend much time in prison. In April 2021, Lang was arrested and charged with the murder of Mildred Matheny. The trial began in early 2023, where Lang was accused of the assault and murder of Mildred Matheny. A small fragment of genetic material became the focal point of a major trial in a West Palm Beach courtroom. The sperm found in Matheny's assault kit, according to those attempting to prove Lang's guilt, linked straight to Richard Lang. During the trial, the scientist who made the match spoke in front of the courts. They couldn't say for certain that the DNA they discovered came from Lang, but they did claim that it was far more likely, 27 quadrillion times more likely, that it came from him than from someone else unrelated to the case. Scott Skier, Lang's attorney, contended that the DNA could be from Lang's close male cousins as well. However, after identifying Lang as a suspect, detectives did not test any of them for DNA matching. This argument was rejected by Assistant State Attorneys Joe Walensky and Critchett Mixon. They called it speculative and reminded the jurors that no other family member was in Florida in 1985. Lang traveled to Florida from Massachusetts in his 20s to work as a plumber. And he was 25 at the time of Matheny's assault, so nothing more made sense than one thing: Lang was the real culprit. Circuit Court Judge Dahlia Weiss chose to sentence Lang to life in prison for the most serious accusation of first-degree murder. Lang was found guilty at the age of 63. After Lang was convicted, his family informed the judge that they would appeal the judgment. His attorney read the letter aloud in court. They thought the conviction contradicted what they knew about Lang. They said that the man in court was not the same person they knew, and that the actions he was accused of were inconsistent with his true nature. The letter offered a different story about the man who was found guilty in 1985 of viciously abusing 78-year-old Matheny. Lang was regarded as a loving father, son, brother, and uncle who led a decent life based on his Catholic values. Matheny's great niece, on the other hand, addressed a letter to the judge reminding the court of Matheny's severe pain and the agony she had been in before she died. One of the lawyers, Mixon, read aloud a letter written by Matheny's great niece. It contradicted Lang's plea for clemency. She said, "May God have mercy on this man's soul, but not on this court. He didn't deserve mercy," she said. Mixon begged the judges to keep Matheny's fear and sorrow in mind. Weiss, the judge, agreed that Matheny's death was horrific and ruthless. Mixon requested a second life sentence for battery, in addition to the earlier one for killing. Skier requested 9 years, but Weiss agreed on 15. Richard Curtis Lang was sentenced to life in prison for the death of Mildred Matheny. He's living the rest of his life in prison right now. Bringing closure to a case may seem straightforward, given the familiarity with the details, characters, and events involved. Yet, the emotional weight and complexity that came with such a journey cannot be understated. Gary Matheny had been yearning for a call like the one he finally received for over 36 years. Finally, he learned that someone had been charged with his old mother's horrible demise. He articulated his emotions by saying, "I'd given up hope." He had gone through years of uncertainty, now at the age of 88. But today, with the news of the arrest, he was overjoyed. As we conclude this account, we are left with haunting questions. We can't help but wonder about Joseph Norman Hill and the dark secrets he may have taken to his grave. What compelled him to commit such heinous acts? Were there more victims who remain undiscovered? On April 24, 1987, 19-year-old Wendy Augie had lunch at La Paloma restaurant in Bellingham, Washington, and mentioned to her classmates about meeting a man named Mike Johnson in a three-piece suit. They planned a date later that evening. Later, they met a friend in Burlington, gave them a lift, and then spent time at another friend's place in Bellingham until 1 a.m. on April 25th. That was the last time anyone saw Wendy. What happened after that night in Bellingham? And where did Wendy go after her date with Mike? Bellingham, located in Washington, boasts a diverse population that brings vibrancy to the city. Known for its rich history and scenic beauty, both recreational and historic sites influence the lifestyle here. Residents enjoy various outdoor activities and cultural experiences, reflecting the city's balance between modernity and its storied past. The community is friendly, welcoming, and tight-knit. However, like many cities, Bellingham isn't without its challenges. The crime rate, while generally low, has seen some notable incidents. One such case that stands out in 2023 is the unresolved mystery of Wendy Augie. Wendy Augie, born on February 15, 1958, hailed from Bellingham, Washington. Although details about her parents remain unknown, Wendy's life was anything but ordinary. Standing at 5'6" and weighing 105 pounds, she had striking brown hair and hazel eyes. A unique tattoo adorned her right forearm, and her ears sparkled with piercings. But what truly set Wendy apart was her resilience. At 28, she was not only a single mother to 2 beautiful children, but also a dedicated student at McDonald's Beauty School. Her passion and determination were evident to all who knew her. Yet behind her vibrant life, no one knew that something bad was about to happen. Wendy's story was about to take a turn that no one could have anticipated. On a seemingly ordinary day, April 24, 1987, Wendy Augie decided to have her lunch at La Paloma restaurant. After her meal, she returned with an unexpected story to share with her classmates. She had met a man sharply dressed in a three-piece suit. His name? Mike Johnson. Wendy seemed excited about a planned date with him that very evening. Later that day, around 4:30 p.m., she was spotted with Mike again at La Paloma. The two seemed to be enjoying their time, even bumping into one of Wendy's friends. They generously offered this friend a lift to Burlington, and later they visited another friend in Bellingham. Their evening extended until the early hours of April 25th, with the two staying at this friend's place until about 1 a.m. Little did anyone know, this would be the last time Wendy was seen. On April 26th, Wendy's babysitter expected her, but there was no sign of her. A few days later, on April 28th, alarm bells began to ring. She grew more concerned when Wendy didn't show up to collect her 8-year-old daughter, a responsibility she never missed. Concerned, the babysitter knocked repeatedly at Wendy's apartment, but no answer came. The unsettling silence raised more questions than answers. Where was Wendy Augie? The investigation into Wendy Augie's disappearance took a chilling turn when the police arrived. As the police detectives entered Wendy's apartment, the scene was unsettling. 2 drying pools of blood were found near the head of her bed, with additional splatters on the headboard and under the pillow. The bedsheets bore stains that were later identified as biological specimens from a male. The clothes Wendy was last seen wearing, brown boots, gray corduroy pants, and a Levi's jean jacket, were discovered inside out between the bed and the wall. This suggested a hurried change or possible struggle. The investigation took another turn when it was revealed that Mike Johnson, Wendy's date on the night she went missing, was seen at the Lighthouse Mission homeless shelter in Bellingham just 6 hours after her last known sighting. He had borrowed parts of a 3-piece suit from a worker at the shelter, pretending to be affluent to impress Wendy. Johnson, who had started working at La Paloma restaurant, took Wendy's 1972 Ford Torino to his workplace. There, he committed theft, taking all the money from the till and a bottle of Jack Daniels before vanishing. The subsequent days brought more revelations. Wendy's vehicle was spotted crossing the U.S.-Canada border at Oroville, Washington. A day later, the same car was found abandoned in Eugene, Oregon. Inside, the police discovered a Burger King hamburger box. The fingerprints on the box led them to a man named Darren D. O'Neill, whose fingerprint has been on the system due to his past criminal deeds. Further investigation revealed that the job application Mike Johnson had filled out at La Paloma bore fingerprints matching those of O'Neill. Witnesses' descriptions confirmed that O'Neill had used Mike Johnson as an alias. In the trunk of Wendy's car, the police found clothing items that matched the description of the 3-piece suit loaned to Mike Johnson from the Lighthouse Mission shelter. A tiny red dot, possibly blood, was observed on the slacks. Despite the mounting evidence pointing towards O'Neill, there was a significant hurdle. Wendy's body was never found. Without this crucial piece of evidence, charging O'Neill for Wendy's disappearance became challenging. The case, with its twists and turns, eventually grew cold, leaving more questions than answers. The community was left to wonder what truly happened to Wendy Augie on that fateful night in 1987, and would justice ever be served? Darren D. O'Neill was born on February 26, 1960 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His parents, Daryl and Krista O'Neill, raised him primarily in Colorado Springs, Colorado. With 2 elder brothers, Michael and Kevin, and a younger sister, Kristen, Darren was the middle child. The family's nomadic lifestyle, moving from city to city due to Daryl's army postings, significantly shaped Darren's future as a drifter. During his high school years in Fort Polk, Darren met June Hodges, who later became his wife. The couple had a son named Christopher, who was adopted and raised by Darren's parents in Colorado Springs. Interestingly, while still married to June, Darren entered a common-law marriage in Levittown, Pennsylvania, fathering a second son, Jason. Darren's passion for Western novels, especially those by Louis L'Amour, was evident. He even adopted numerous aliases from L'Amour's novels. This fascination with the Wild West extended to his choice of hangouts, country and western bars, which he frequented, possibly scouting for potential victims. The FBI believed that Darren's life and crimes were influenced by his love for Western literature, seeing him as living out fantasies from these novels. His criminal record began in 1982 in Colorado Springs, with charges ranging from public indecencies to more severe crimes. In 1984, he faced charges of harassing a woman. However, the charges were dropped when the victim disappeared. By 1986, he was arrested again for an inhumane assault, but managed to escape, leading to an arrest warrant. His criminal activities spanned continents, with suspicions of inhumane crimes in Germany during his military service, and his time with his parents. In Wendy's case, he was found guilty of auto theft. Darren's life was a complex web of personal struggles, criminal activities, and a deep-seated fascination with the Wild West. But behind this facade was a man capable of heinous crimes, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. The Wendy Augie case, which had gone cold for decades, experienced a significant breakthrough in 2015. With the rapid advancements in DNA technology, the Washington State Patrol's crime lab decided to revisit the evidence collected from the crime scene. They contacted the Bellingham Police Department, suggesting that the DNA samples be retested. The results were startling. The biological stain on Wendy's bedsheet was confirmed to belong to Darren D. O'Neill. This revelation reignited the investigation. In 2020, another report was handed over to the Bellingham Police Department. This report confirmed that the blood discovered on the front left pocket of the men's slacks found in the trunk of Wendy's stolen car matched Wendy's DNA. This was a significant piece of evidence linking O'Neill directly to the crime scene. By 2021, the authorities were closing in on O'Neill. They took cheek swabs from him to match against the DNA found at Wendy's apartment. The results were conclusive. On October 11, 2022, O'Neill was officially charged with second-degree murder concerning Wendy Augie's death. Eventually, by early March 2023, O'Neill was extradited to Washington from the Two Rivers Correctional Institute in Umatilla, Oregon. He appeared in the Whatcom County Court, facing the charges that had been haunting him for decades. It's worth noting that O'Neill was already serving time for other heinous crimes. However, he was eligible for parole in May of 2033, adding another layer of complexity to the case. His next court appearance was scheduled for April 5, 2023, specifically for the murder of Wendy Augie. The anticipation was palpable. The community, shaken by Wendy's mysterious disappearance, was now eagerly waiting for justice to be served. However, the details of the trial's outcome remain undisclosed to the public. The journey to closure is often long and winding, especially for families who have lost a loved one in mysterious circumstances. For Wendy Augie's family, the years without answers must have been agonizing. Each day, they may have grappled with a mix of hope, despair, and the haunting question, what happened to Wendy? When the breakthrough in the case finally came, one can only imagine the flood of emotions Wendy's family experienced. Relief came with a hope of justice. As Wendy's fate became evident, sadness deepened. Yet gratitude grew for those persistent in seeking the truth. Bellingham Police Chief Rebecca Mertzig captured this sentiment perfectly. In a news release, she remarked, "Nothing short of dedicated investigative work started by Bellingham Police Department detectives in 1987, continuing for 35 years, and working with improved DNA testing, allowed this case to be solved." It was a testament to the unwavering commitment of the police department. 3 generations of BPD detectives had passed the baton, ensuring that the quest for answers never waned. Chief Mertzig continued, "This is truly exemplary teamwork, spanning 3 generations of BBT detectives to never stop the work of finding justice for Wendy's family." This statement stressed the importance of persistence, collaboration, and the advancements in forensic science that played a pivotal role in cracking the case. For Wendy's family, this closure might offer a chance to heal, to remember Wendy not just for the tragedy that befell her, but for the life she lived. It's a reminder that even in the face of the most challenging mysteries, with dedication and perseverance, justice can prevail. What do you believe happened during Wendy's last hours? Could there have been any overlooked details in the investigation? A 29-year-old mother named Mary Mathis Davis disappeared on May 30th, 1987, while taking her lunch break at work. She was last seen at her place of employment, Lanier's Ace Hardware store in Lexington, North Carolina. The authorities located her lifeless body a day later, not far from where she vanished. It was a sad realization that she had been assaulted and strangled. Was the perpetrator someone Mary knew? And why would it take 36 long years to solve the case? Lexington, known as the barbecue capital of the world, is a small town in central North Carolina, about 20 miles south of Winston-Salem, with a population of about 19,000 people. Uptown, the city's core, serves as its shopping hub. Aside from its culinary prominence, Lexington has an extensive legacy of arts and culture, aviation history, and access to gorgeous state parks with impressive mountains. This southern treasure is known for its welcoming community, exquisite cuisine, and stunning natural setting, all of which contribute to a fulfilling and calm lifestyle. This quiet location, however, has some buried secrets beneath its serene facade. Mary Davis was born on February 12, 1958, and not much is known about her early years. What is known is that Lisa Hinkle was her sister, and the two of them spent their early years together. These sisters were a powerful team, and nothing could keep them apart as they played games and explored the vast outdoors. Lisa remembers Mary as a lovely and compassionate lady who always made everyone around her smile. Mary had a way of making people feel at ease in her presence. Mary eventually met Richard Davis as time went on. They became more closely connected, and they ultimately got married. Mary soon gave birth to an adorable daughter in 1986, who was only a year old in 1987 when Mary disappeared. Mary worked at Lanier Hardware in Lexington. Mary was a wonderful mother, sister, wife, aunt, and friend. According to her niece Lori, she was a shining presence in the world. Little did the family know that something disturbing was about to happen that would forever change their lives. Like any other day, Mary Davis headed out the door for work on May 30th, 1987. Just like the previous Saturdays, it felt routine. When she arrived at Lanier Hardware, where she worked, she smiled at her coworkers and got started on her regular responsibilities. She was looking forward to her lunch break, which was about to begin. She headed to a local restaurant in anticipation of a delectable lunch. Little did she realize that no one would ever see her alive again. Mary didn't come back to work after her lunch break, and her absence was noticed. As the minutes passed into what felt like hours, her coworkers became more and more worried. They began to worry as they pondered what might be holding her up. Was she all right? The issue grew more serious as time went on. A coworker of Mary's hurried to the eatery where she had lunch, but Mary was not there. The restaurant staff was also unable to assist them, so they had no option but to inform the authorities. The cops were called right away. They then made the tough but necessary call to Mary's family and her husband to let them know what was happening. Mary Davis, who had gone missing on that critical day, was the subject of an investigation by the police. The next day, they made a gruesome discovery. Mary's lifeless body was found behind the Winn-Dixie supermarket at 802 East Center Street in Lexington, North Carolina. The mystery of what happened to Mary would trouble her family members and the neighborhood for years to come. It was a devastating finish to a day that started out like any other. After the discovery of Mary Davis's lifeless body on May 31st, 1987, outside the Winn-Dixie grocery store located at 802 East Center Street, just a 20-minute walk from her workplace at Lanier's Ace Hardware store, the grim findings of the autopsy were released. It was a heartbreaking revelation. Mary had been strangled to death and had also been subjected to a horrible assault. Her death was clearly judged a homicide. As Mary's bereaved family battled to come to grips with their loss, officials launched an investigation into her untimely demise. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance and the ferocity of her murder left numerous unanswered questions, and the investigators remained steadfast in their determination to uncover the truth. Following this heinous incident, detectives had bits of evidence in the form of DNA gathered from the crime scene. However, the technology available at the time limited what could be done with this critical data. Despite this setback, the diligent investigators chased every lead and tip that came their way. They made every effort, even reaching out to the public, in the hopes that someone would come forward with information that would blow the case wide open. Despite their best attempts, the elusive killer seemed to have fled without a trace, leaving the police disappointed and frustrated. Days passed into weeks, and weeks turned into months, yet the killer remained unidentified. Mary's family, on the other hand, refused to give up hope. They clung to the faith that justice would be served eventually, a light of hope in the face of unimaginable tragedy. While they tried their best to move forward with their lives, the wounds of grief remained raw and painful in their hearts. And just like many other cases, Mary's case grew cold, and the perpetrator was nowhere to be found. The case of Mary Davis remained unresolved for many years, but optimism was renewed when modern technology provided a breakthrough. Because of technological developments, investigators opted to reevaluate the evidence. They forwarded physical evidence from the case to the North Carolina State Crime Lab for examination. This decision was motivated by the realization that technology has advanced significantly since the initial inquiry. Following a review of the data, the investigators called the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation to further investigate the possibilities presented by these new discoveries. This united effort was a watershed moment in the murder investigation's 36-year history. The DNA evidence from the case was turned over to the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation in 2022. They began a difficult process here, utilizing the most recent advances in DNA technology to produce evidence that would finally shed light on the identity of the criminal. This crucial evidence was also shared with the specialized organization Othram. Othram's team of experts created a thorough genealogical profile for an unknown male suspect using forensic-grade genome sequencing, a cutting-edge technique. With this profile in hand, Othram's in-house genealogy experts dove into the complex area of genealogy, producing investigative leads based on genetic data. These leads were then forwarded to the investigators, signaling a significant breakthrough in the case. With this fresh intelligence, law enforcement was eventually able to identify the suspect, bringing the long-elusive truth about Mary Davis's terrible death closer to conclusion. This victory was a ray of hope for her family, who had waited patiently for justice to be carried out. The Lexington Police Department made a big revelation on February 7, 2023, finally throwing light on the decades-old mystery surrounding Mary Mathis Davis's assault and murder. Their discovery identified Russell Grant Wood as the primary suspect in this horrible crime. This discovery offered satisfaction to the investigators who had been working on the case for decades. Finally, they thought they were getting near. However, a huge impediment arose. Russell's background check revealed that he died in 2013 at the age of 58, making any attempt to bring him to justice impossible. Lexington police officers, along with the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, presented their case to District Attorney Gary Frank, based on a collection of information obtained over the years by various investigators. Based on the facts presented, Mr. Frank issued an official letter declaring that if Russell Grant Wood had been alive today, the state would have pursued indictments for first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, and first-degree rape charges against him. Lexington Police Chief Robbie Rummage revealed at this discovery that Russell and Mary were not strangers to each other, but the nature of their relationship remained unknown. Rummage agreed that the reason for the crime would be little more than conjecture at this stage. During a press conference, Chief Rummage said that Russell had previously been recognized as a suspect in the case. Nonetheless, due to a lack of adequate evidence at the time, police were compelled to shift their attention away from him. This revelation added to the already complicated case's frustration. Although the revelation gave Mary's family and the community a feeling of closure, it also left an abiding sense of dissatisfaction that justice would never be fully served because the culprit had died, taking the secrets of that tragic day with him. After 36 years, Mary Mathis Davis's family finally found closure in Lexington. The Lexington Police Department's recent announcement, attended by Mary's sister Lisa Yates, niece Lori Martin, and daughter Tracy Cleary, marked the end of their agonizing quest for answers. Lori Martin, speaking on behalf of the family, extended heartfelt gratitude to the dedicated Lexington police officers. They tirelessly re-examined the case, ensuring Mary was not forgotten. Although their beloved Mary couldn't be brought back, the family finally had some answers, providing a bittersweet sense of closure. Lexington Police Chief Robbie Rummage stressed the importance of ongoing efforts to find the suspect, giving the family some answers and underscoring the value of persistence and hope. This resolution showcased the dedication of countless individuals, including generations of the police officers and investigators. Lori Martin concluded with a heartfelt tribute to Mary, describing her as a radiant presence in their lives. She expressed gratitude for having Mary as a loving mother, sister, wife, aunt, and friend. During the gathering, Tracy Cleary, Mary's daughter, shared a touching poem in memory of her mother. "To my dear angel in heaven, I just want you to know how much you're in my thoughts and how much I love you so. Though you are in God's care, and that's how it should be, but when I get to heaven, He will give you back to me." On what would have been Mary's 65th birthday, they held a memorial at Forest Hill Memorial Park on February 12th. This poignant moment allowed them to honor her memory and the love they held for her. On October 5, 1996, the Denver community was disturbed by police sirens responding to a call regarding an apartment on the 1900 block of East 17th Avenue. Inside, they discovered the body of a 35-year-old woman, Terry Turachak. Upon examination, the police discovered that Terry had been strangled and had sustained severe head injuries. Who could have committed such a heinous crime? And what could have transpired between Terry and her assailant that resulted in her tragic death? Denver, Colorado, with a population of 700,000, boasts a vibrant blend of history and culture, attracting many to its numerous museums. This city merges the old and new, offering a wealth of recreational and historical sites. Denver's neighborhoods exude a small-town feel, where friendly residents known for their adventurous spirit often know their neighbors by name. However, Denver grapples with urban challenges, including a high crime rate, one of America's highest, casting a shadow over its close-knit communities. The unresolved 1996 case of Terry Turachak remains a poignant reminder of this darker aspect of city life. Terry Ann Turachak, born on May 14, 1961, hailed from the vast landscapes of Michigan. The daughter of James C. Turachak, a commendable sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, and a valorous Vietnam War veteran, Terry grew up with the spirit of resilience. Her father James, even with his tough military exterior, was the very definition of a loving father to Terry. And while the details of her mother, Marlene L. Sackich, remain a mystery, it's known that Terry wasn't an only child. James Turachak Jr., her younger brother, entered the scene a few years later, and the two of them had an enduring and tight-knit bond that persisted even as they journeyed into adulthood. Terry, in her own stride, embraced motherhood with grace. She got married to Douglas A. Oakland in 1979, and they were blessed with 3 children. Their names are not known, however, one thing was crystal clear: Terry was a phenomenal mother. James Jr. frequently reminisced about her maternal instincts, always praising Terry for the care and love she showered upon her young ones. As the years rolled on, Terry found herself settling in Denver, Colorado, residing at 1927 East 17th Avenue. Her love life was complicated. While she had a main relationship, rumors hinted that she was open to other possibilities. Life for Terry was in a steady phase. Friends, family, and the usual ups and downs, she was making the most of her journey. Yet, with life's unpredictable ebb and flow, one can never truly forecast what's around the bend. So for Terry, too, no one could foresee that the end of her happy times was just around the corner. On Friday, October 4th, 1996, Denver seemed like any other calm autumn day, with residents going about their daily routines, unaware of the looming tragedy. Terry Turacek finished her workday and headed home, looking forward to an evening with friends. With her children away, she enjoyed the solitude of her empty apartment. As evening approached, she prepared to join Denver's vibrant nightlife. At around 8 p.m., Terry stepped out, her spirit in harmony with the city's. Little breadcrumbs of Terry's night can be picked up here and there. A neighbor caught a glimpse of Terry returning around 11:30 p.m. Nothing seemed amiss. But the wheels of time and events have a way of catching everyone off guard. The morning sun of Saturday, October 5th, cast long shadows, and a stillness took over Terry's apartment complex. Oddly, the door to Terry's apartment remained ajar. Hours ticked by, but it wasn't until the noon sun reached its zenith that a concerned neighbor noticed the open door. Perhaps he thought she had overslept, or maybe she was in the shower. With a tinge of apprehension, he called out, his voice echoing through the living room. Nothing. A quick scan revealed no sign of Terry in the usual places: the living room, kitchen. The final stop was the bedroom. The sight that greeted him there was beyond comprehension. Terry, whom he had just seen the night before, full of life and enthusiasm, now lay lifeless. Panic surged. Racing out, he fumbled for his phone and dialed 911. His voice choked with disbelief. In the distance, the piercing sound of police sirens grew louder, culminating in a cacophony outside Terry's apartment. Police officers, with a practiced calm that hid their internal turmoil, stepped in to take over. The scene was all too familiar. A life taken too soon, a community in shock, and a family left with an agonizing void. The Terry Turacek case had begun. When Terry Turacek's body was discovered, it wasn't just a blow to her family, but to the entire community. To get to the bottom of this grim discovery, detectives of the Denver Police Department spearheaded the investigation. Immediately, they recognized the significance of the scene before them. The bedroom told a tale of violence. Signs of a struggle were evident, a testament to Terry's resistance. Neighbors, in their attempts to fill the gaps of that fateful night, mentioned disturbances between 1 and 1:30 a.m. However, no one had reported seeing anyone exit Terry's apartment, even though the door was conspicuously left open, an eerie invitation to the horror inside. Given the absence of forced entry, detectives surmised that the perpetrator might have been known to Terry, or had gained her trust, only to exploit it in the most heinous way. Dr. T. Henry, the medical examiner, was tasked with the grim responsibility of examining Terry's body. The results were shocking. Terry hadn't just been killed, she had been thoroughly assaulted. Strangulation was cited as the cause of death, but she had also suffered blunt force trauma. A horrid ending to a life that was otherwise filled with promise. As investigators combed through Terry's world, a hair recovered from her thigh stood out. The hope was that this tiny strand would be the key to unlocking the identity of her murderer. Piecing the narrative together, investigators connected with Terry's acquaintances and neighbors. And it wasn't long before puzzling snippets of information began to emerge. The neighbor who last saw Terry entering her apartment around 11:30 p.m. noticed she wasn't alone. An African-American man with a distinctive afro accompanied her. Whether he was a friend or a foe, he was the last known individual seen with Terry. Adding to the timeline's complexity, another neighbor reported a commotion at approximately 12:30 a.m. from Terry's apartment. Intriguingly, around 1 a.m., Terry was seen knocking on another neighbor's door, seemingly injured, asking for money. Could this be related to the man seen with her earlier? The most telling piece of information came from Terry's boyfriend, whose name wasn't released. While he had an alibi for the night of the murder, a story from a week prior raised eyebrows. While in her apartment, Terry and her boyfriend had been robbed and assaulted by 3 unidentified African-American men. Was there a connection between this incident and her eventual murder? That question haunted the detectives. In the weeks that followed, leads were chased down. The mysterious man seen entering the apartment with Terry became a person of interest. Was he connected to the previous week's assault? Or was Terry's request for money that night somehow linked to this individual? However, despite their best efforts, the solid evidence needed to pin down a suspect remained elusive. A key suspect was even brought in, subjected to interrogation and DNA testing. But when the results came back, disappointment set in. His DNA was not a match. The community's anguish deepened with every passing day. They looked to the detectives for answers, for some semblance of justice. Terry's family, devastated by the loss, held on to hope that the perpetrator would be brought to book. However, as weeks turned into months, the once blazing trail began to dim. The detectives, despite their tireless efforts, were confronted with the harsh reality that they might never find Terry's killer. Leads that once held promise evaporated, and the case, regrettably, turned cold. In 2004, the once cold and seemingly unsolvable case of Terry Turachek experienced a sudden and unexpected revival. The curtains of time that had hidden clues and concealed the path to justice were now beginning to rise. A major breakthrough came in August of that year, almost a decade since the horrifying incident had taken place. The CODIS DNA system, a comprehensive database that houses DNA profiles from across the nation, indicated a hit. It was a match to the DNA evidence that had been recovered from Terry's body years ago. This DNA had always been a loose end for the investigators, a piece of the puzzle that refused to fit anywhere. But now, there was a lead. Detective Dixie Crimes, a seasoned investigator, was handed the reins of this reopened case. With her analytical mind and meticulous approach, she was determined to follow this new lead and see where it would take the investigation. And this DNA trail led them straight to Ricky Dawson. He was no stranger to the law. His DNA was already present within the CODIS system, indicating a past criminal history. Dawson, an African-American male, suddenly became the epicenter of this investigation. Now, with a fresh lead in their hands and a renewed zeal, the law enforcement community was once again buzzing with activity related to the Terry Turachek case. The hope was to finally bring closure to a haunting chapter in the city's history and deliver justice to a soul that had been wronged. Detective Dixie Crimes, now having a name and face to work with, began her efforts to understand the connection between Dawson and the victim. Did they know each other? Was there a motive? Were there any other pieces of evidence or witnesses that might have been overlooked during the initial investigation? The case, which had once been a chilling enigma wrapped in layers of mystery, had now transformed into a labyrinth of connections waiting to be explored. As Detective Crimes delved deeper, the task at hand was clear: to validate the DNA match, establish the narrative, and build a watertight case against the new prime suspect. The streets of Denver, which had once whispered rumors and theories about the Turchak case, now waited with bated breath. They looked forward to the day when they could finally say justice had been served for Terry. While much of the city was optimistic, there were still many challenges to overcome. DNA evidence, though compelling, isn't the end-all of a criminal case. It's one thing to identify a suspect, but another to prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Ricky Dawson, a man whose life seemed to carry both shadows and light, born on January 24, 1961 in Florida. He was 43 years old in 2004. It means he'd been 35 when Terry Turchak met her tragic end in 1996. But Terry wasn't his only connection to darkness. Going back to his younger days, Dawson had his own struggles. Ricky's childhood was not without its complications. It's said that childhood behaviors often give a glimpse into an individual's future. And in Ricky's case, it was no different. His education, marital life, and other personal details remain hazy. But one thing that stands out is his criminal history. Dawson's involvement in criminal activities isn't limited to the Turchak case. His DNA was found to match an unidentified profile from a harrowing case in Seattle in 2000. The victim was a 40-year-old woman named Debbie Cascio. The tragic details surrounding Cascio's demise mirror those of Turchak. Debbie, like Terry, had suffered multiple blunt force injuries and was strangled. This unfortunate connection between the two women and Dawson brought the eyes of the law upon him once again. Debbie's story is kept alive, both by the city and by her loving daughter, Tabitha Johnson. A leaf of remembrance at the Seattle Justice Center bears Debbie's name, a gesture by the Homeless Remembrance Project to ensure her story is never forgotten. Johnson, who was only 11 when her mother passed away, has been a beacon of resilience. The memories of her mother, like those of glass-blowing art sessions or beach days, are fondly remembered. Tabitha, now a mother herself, still feels the void left by Debbie's absence. While she seeks closure and justice, the specifics surrounding her mother's case remain undisclosed, as the Seattle police haven't released further details. Dawson's criminal exploits didn't stop in Seattle or Denver. He found himself in Florida's clutches in 2004. This was when Denver police were informed of a DNA match linking him to the 1996 cold case of Terry Turchak. At this time, he was already in custody in Florida, and later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, earning a 25-year prison sentence. Now, he also stood accused of first-degree murder charges in connection to the Denver case of Terry Turchak. The moment the name Ricky Dawson surfaced, the investigation into Terry Turchak's murder intensified. Detectives reviewed the case files and interviews from the original investigation, scouring for any mention of Ricky. They didn't find his name directly, but a revelation awaited them. The description of a man, Terry's companion on the night she was killed, given by her neighbors, matched Ricky's. The depth of Ricky's criminal past was soon uncovered, and it was staggering. it wasn't just a one-time offender. There was a trail of crimes linked to his name. A prime suspect in the Terry Turchak case, detectives knew they needed to speak with him. In December 2004, they found themselves face-to-face with Ricky Dawson at the Sewanee Correctional Institute in Florida, where he was already incarcerated. Their goal was clear: find out what Ricky knew about Terry and establish his involvement in her tragic end. While the details of their conversation remain confidential, the interview led to another intriguing lead: an associate of Ricky's who was close to him during the time of the murder. This associate, whose name wasn't revealed, was well acquainted with Terry. He admitted to spending time in her apartment, and even confirmed being there with both Ricky and Terry the night she was killed. According to him, the three of them had been using drugs, though he claimed to have left around midnight, unaware of the events that followed. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The detectives now had a path laid out in front of them. They conducted a crucial DNA test. The new DNA samples taken from Ricky were compared to the hair found on Terry's body. And there it was, a match to the hair's major DNA profile. With this conclusive evidence, it was clear that Ricky Dawson was connected to Terry's murder. But in a surprising turn, the proceedings to charge him with her murder were not immediately pursued. Perhaps, some theorized, it was because Ricky already had around 20 years remaining on his current sentence. As a result, Terry's case remained in a dormant state for over another decade. A long 22 years after Terry Turchak's tragic demise, a new hope emerged for justice. 14 years later, Detective John McGrail from the Denver Police Cold Case Unit was given the responsibility of revisiting the case. As he pored over the details, McGrail realized the evidence was pretty compelling. To him, it seemed almost like an open and shut case. Wanting to leave no stone unturned, in December 2018, he made the decision to submit the evidence for further laboratory analysis. This included material collected from the crime scene and the findings from Terry's post-mortem examination. By August 2019, the results were in. The DNA evidence provided a conclusive match. The gears of justice were starting to turn faster. The pieces of the puzzle were all pointing in one direction: Ricky Dawson, the same Ricky who had been serving time in Florida for another crime. With the renewed evidence at hand, it became clear it was time to take concrete action against Dawson for Terry's murder. Fast forward to January 26, 2023, a pivotal day in the investigation. An arrest warrant was officially issued against Ricky Dawson, charging him with the first-degree murder of Terry Turchak. Ricky, now age 62, found himself in an even tighter legal bind. Despite already being incarcerated in Florida, the wheels of justice did not stop. He was extradited by the Denver Police Department to face his charges head-on in Denver. The gravity of the situation became real for Ricky on February 23rd, when he was informed of the charges against him. A court appearance was marked on the calendar for March 23, 2023, a day many eagerly awaited. Although the court's final ruling is yet to be publicly disclosed, given the mounting evidence, many believe Ricky Dawson will be convicted for his involvement in Terry's tragic end. For James Turchak, Terry's brother, the pain of losing his sister in 1996 was a wound that never truly healed. For 27 long years, he grappled with a mix of despair and hope, uncertain if justice would ever be served for Terry's untimely death. Yet with the recent news of an arrest in connection to his sister's murder, James was engulfed by a flood of emotions. James shared with the media his relentless commitment to his sister's case, stating he had always held on to the belief that the truth would someday come to light. The realization that the alleged perpetrator was in the process of being extradited to face charges brought the gravity of the situation to the forefront for James. He spoke to the void left by Terry's absence, describing it as an irreplaceable loss that time wouldn't heal. "Family moves forward," James stated, emphasizing the gaping void that Terry's departure had created. He often wondered about the milestones she missed, especially the joy she would have felt becoming a grandmother. Terry, as James finally remembered, had a radiant spirit that touched everyone she knew. James admitted that while part of him yearns for forgiveness, he's not quite there yet. The pain, still too fresh, makes it a difficult journey. But above all, he firmly expressed his desire for justice to prevail. James hopes that Ricky Dawson faces the full weight of the law, and that he remains behind bars for the remainder of his days, ensuring that Terry's memory is honored by the justice she rightfully deserves. On December 7, 2017, the peaceful North Shore town of Pupukea, Hawaii, hid a dark secret. A terrible occurrence shook the lovely suburb that very day. This story is about Thelma Boinville, a diligent 51-year-old teacher with an unremarkable life who worked as a part-time cleaner at a holiday rental. She had no idea that her average day would turn into a nightmare that would change the lives of everyone around her. She was discovered dead at a vacation rental on Keiki Road by the renters. As information surfaced, the community was caught in a web of unanswered questions, dread, and a quest for seeking truth. How did Thelma Boinville, an ordinary teacher, meet a chilling end in a serene Hawaiian town? What shocking revelations lie ahead? Was her death a mere accident? Or was it murder? Thelma Boinville's life was inevitably shaped by Pupukea, a lovely village on Oahu's North Shore, in the Kaualoa district. The Hawaiian word Pupukea means white shell, describing its immaculate surroundings. Pupukea is known for its beautiful beaches, including Sunset Beach and Waimea Bay, attracting surfers and beachgoers. Three Tables and Sharks Cove are great diving and snorkeling locations. The town is peaceful, but Thelma's life, driven by the need to support her family, was cruelly changed at Pupukea, leaving an unforgettable effect on the town. The North Shore community of Hawaii knew Thelma Boinville as a committed teacher and a loving mother. She was born in a small Brazilian town on February 4, 1966. Throughout her life, her curiosity and love for learning remained defining aspects of her personality. Thelma became a school teacher at the Sunset Beach Elementary School. She knew education was crucial to developing young brains and wanted to help her kids. Thelma thought teaching was her calling. Her commitment to teaching kids earned her colleagues' esteem over time. Her classroom fostered and encouraged young brains with compassion and encouragement. Thelma's colleagues saw her as a dedicated teacher who went above and beyond to help her pupils succeed. Thelma's family was her priority, even if teaching was her career. She worked part-time at a North Shore vacation rental cleaner to support her family. This demonstrated her tireless work ethic and commitment to her family. Thelma married Kevin Emery and had a daughter named Makana who meant everything to her. Makana was her kid, confidant, and friend. Their close relationship showed Thelma's maternal attitude and unlimited affection. Makana leaned on her mother for advice and encouragement. Her generosity, devotion to family and students, and presence transformed the town forever. Unfortunately, she had no idea that fate had an unexpected and devastating twist in store for her. Behind the postcard-perfect appearance of North Shore, Hawaii was a frightening and unexpected tragedy. Thelma Boinville, a diligent teacher, enjoyed North Shore's tranquility. To support her family, she worked a second job cleaning vacation properties in the region. She came to a vacation home on Keiki Road, an unremarkable area that became associated with terror. Without Thelma's knowledge, this idyllic environment was disrupted in the most unexpected manner. Thelma cleaned the holiday rental while her 8-year-old daughter, Makana, slept in the family vehicle outside. Thelma Boinville encountered inexplicable violence in the holiday rental. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Haley Dandurand were burglarizing the house when she arrived. A normal weekday turned into a horrific event that shook Thelma's life. Thelma's head was badly hit as the fight intensified. The peaceful North Shore saw an inexplicable act of violence. Thelma battled for survival in a terrible fight before dying in the tranquility of the holiday house. Chilling blunt force injuries to her skull marked the violence. She left a chilling pool of blood, a reminder of the savagery that had taken her life. The terror didn't stop even there. Makana, her 8-year-old daughter. Makana was unaware of the darkness as a child. She was hopeful for her mother's return. The tranquility was short-lived as Stephen Brown and Haley Dandurand, the heinous criminals, turned their attention to Makana. Makana was bound and gagged in the holiday rental, putting her into a nightmare no kid should ever experience. Her innocent, trusting world was broken. The darkness of her kidnapper's malice replaced the beautiful Hawaiian light that had drenched the automobile she waited in. Stephen Brown and Haley Dandurand inhumanely confined and silenced Makana and deceived her. They cruelly told the child that her mother, Thelma Boinville, had been ruthlessly slain. Makana's world collapsed, and her innocence was broken in the cruelest way. Abducting Makana and telling her cruel falsehoods was another horrific episode in this terrible story of violence and deceit. The killers, Stephen Brown and Haley Dandurand, took a life and left irreparable wounds on a young spirit. At approximately 3:20 p.m. local time, the incident was reported, and officers conducting an investigation at the vacation property on Keiki Road in North Shore, Hawaii, discovered the lifeless body of Thelma Boinville, victim of a horrific assassination. The case of Thelma Boinville and the abduction of her daughter Makana on December 7, 2017 sparked a thorough inquiry to find justice. Law enforcement, including the Honolulu Police Department, received a distress call that changed many lives that day. Officers rushed to a Keiki Road vacation rental and saw a terrible tragedy. They found Thelma Boinville dead in the rental. Bloodstains and evidence of a fight told a dismal narrative of what happened inside. The inquiry started with a thorough crime scene inspection. Each piece of evidence was meticulously documented by forensic professionals who searched the holiday rental. Reconstructing Thelma's case and Makana's abduction was the major goal. Thelma's head blunt force damage was crucial evidence from the scene. This horrific detail highlighted the crime's severity. Investigators searched the area for witnesses and went to Makana. Child psychologists and professionals were summoned in to safeguard her mental well-being as she recounted that sad day. McConaughey's story was recorded to find any clues to solve the mystery. Her memories of the offenders, their deeds, and their terrible deceit helped establish the case. Garrett McNamara, Thelma's brother-in-law, is an American big-wave surfer who established the world record for largest wave. McNamara was the first to ride a glacier wave and negotiate a Jaws barrel. He had a huge fan following on social media due to his name in Guinness World Records. The situation changed after surfer Garrett McNamara posted a passionate Facebook video promising a large reward for the suspect's capture. In the video, McNamara, who claimed a family connection to Thelma Boinville's daughter, offered $100,000 for information on the terrible killing on Keiki Beach in North Shore, Oahu. McNamara's passionate plea went viral on social media. The large prize he promised encouraged others to come forward with information. This petition raised public awareness of the need to solve the case and prosecute the offenders. After McNamara's video went viral and raised public awareness, many individuals sent tips, leads, and information about the incident. This information greatly helped law enforcement find and capture the criminals. The law enforcement reaction started the justice process. The Honolulu Police Department started a thorough investigation into the case to quickly catch the perpetrators. The offender was arrested at the Keiki Road vacation home where crucial clues were found. Crime scene detectives methodically searched the Holiday property for evidence of the killer. They meticulously collected DNA, fingerprints, and other forensic evidence to create a case against the offender. The jigsaw pieces came into place as the inquiry continued. Witnesses, including Thelma's daughter McConaughey, helped recreate the events. McConaughey's terrifying story of her mother's killing and her captivity revealed the offender. Compassionate individuals increasing media attention and McNamara's hefty prize offer advanced the investigation and led to the killer's apprehension, Stephen Brown and Haley Dandurand. Stephen Brown was a leading suspect in Thelma Boinville's killing after forensic evidence, witness statements, and investigations. His presence at the crime scene and his participation in the tragic burglary implicated him. Stephen Brown was arrested for justice on December 8, 2017, only 7 hours later. The arrest again shook the community, but this time it offered hope and a pledge to hold the offenders responsible. Stephen Brown's testimony illuminated that fateful day as the inquiry continued. Brown said he and Dandurand used marijuana before entering the vacation property via an open window. Thelma entered, and Dandurand ordered her to lay down so they could tie her up, he said. Investigators viewed Brown's testimony skeptically. His bloody clothes and Thelma's injuries didn't suggest self-defense. McConaughey's terrifying story contradicted Brown's. Deputy Prosecutor Scott Bell was certain that only Brown could subdue Thelma Boinville. McConaughey's testimony that Brown informed her they killed her mother was damaging. The inquiry discovered a complicated network of duplicity, violence, and tragedy in the tranquil North Shore. Justice seemed to be within grasp as the jigsaw pieces fell into place. Stephen Brown, the perpetrator of this terrible killing, had a turbulent history that suggested violence. The 1994-born Brown was 23 when he killed Thelma. His early legal troubles painted a bleak image of a young guy on a disastrous road. Brown's criminal background includes violent action, raising fears about his future aggression. This path raised suspicions as detectives examined his past. Brown's girlfriend at the time of the crime, Haley Dandurand, was a mysterious person. Born in 1997, she was 20 at the time of the crime. Dandurand's role in that day's horrific events confused many. Stephen Brown was convicted of killing, 2 kidnappings, and burglary after trial. The ramifications of his acts began with his punishment. December 7, 2017 saw the gruesome death of devoted teacher and part-time cleaner Thelma Boinville in a holiday rental. Her killer, Stephen Brown's arrest, changed the hunt for closure and responsibility. The legal processes commenced after the arrest. The prosecution used crime scene evidence, witness testimony, and McConaughey's terrifying description to build a strong case. The courtroom became a struggle for truth and justice when the crime was revealed. The jury decided after a lengthy trial that showed the grisly killings and events of that awful day. Stephen Brown was convicted of assassination, abduction, and burglary. After the heated courtroom, Thelma Boinville's family and the North Shore community felt closure. Stephen Brown's legal path began with his conviction. Knowing he would likely spend the remainder of his life in prison, he faced his fate. Though justice was accomplished, Thelma's family and community would be scarred by the atrocity. Heated expectation filled the courtroom after a 2-week trial that captivated the North Shore and the country. After a protracted legal procedure, a 12-member jury of varied origins reached a decision on Friday, January 20th, 2023. The courtroom drama surrounding Stephen Brown, the main suspect in Thelma Boinville's December 2017 killing, shook Papakea's tranquil community. Stephen Brown, 23, and Haley Dandurand, 20, were involved in a case's investigation that changed their lives. The jury had to decide whether they were guilty or innocent in the killing, abduction, and burglary trial. After less than half a day of deliberation, the jury's judgment changed the case. Stephen Brown, identified as playing a key role in the fatal events of that December day, was convicted on multiple charges. His allegations included second-degree killing, the most severe. 2 kidnappings, and 1 burglary were added to Brown's killing conviction. The judgment resonated throughout court. The prosecution carefully developed its case, providing evidence and testimony that formed a horrific picture of the events at the Keiki Road vacation home. With conviction, Deputy Prosecutor Scott Bell said Stephen Brown admitted to Thelma Boinville's daughter that he and Haley Dandurand killed her mother. The prosecution said Brown could physically subdue Thelma. The defense strenuously denied killing, but strongly contended that Stephen Brown was engaged in the burglary and abduction. Brown's court-appointed counsel, William Bagasol, stressed the difference between Brown and his girlfriend, Haley Dandurand, in the tragedy. Bagasol methodically explained that Haley tied Thelma up, and that she had no blood. He also doubted the DNA evidence linking Brown to the weapons. Courtrooms were theaters of emotion and battlegrounds for opposing narratives throughout the trial. The town, horrified by Thelma Boinville's terrible killing, awaited the verdict. After 2017's shock, the North Shore neighborhood's patience was challenged by the trial's delay and conviction. After Stephen Brown's verdict, Thelma Boinville and her family reached a major milestone in their search for justice. The trial brought closure to a community in terror and cleared the path for Haley Dandurand's trial, the second suspect in the case. After the judgment, the North Shore community had a sigh of relief, knowing one chapter of this agonizing journey was over. However, Thelma Boinville and her daughter Makana's suffering will forever remind us of the evil that may lie, even in the most ideal situations. The community watched the court process to secure justice for the victims of this terrible act. After Stephen Brown's trial, the North Shore community and Thelma Boinville's family felt closure. Justice was done after years of suffering, uncertainty, and haunting memories of December 2017. Thelma's family found comfort in the guilty decision after losing their beloved mother and teacher. The judgment reinforced their tireless pursuit of truth and responsibility. Thelma Boinville lives on as a symbol of endurance and the tenacity of justice seekers to date. We finish this sorrowful chapter in Thelma Boinville's story with a reminder of justice's lasting force and a community that refuses to let evil win. Thelma represents resilience and truth-seeking, not victimhood. Her life was cut short, but her legacy honors those who fight for justice in the face of inconceivable suffering. Sharon Anschutz, a 54-year-old woman, was shot and killed at John Butler Dry Cleaners on Easley Bridge Road at 1 p.m. on June 5, 2000. And for the longest time, no arrests were made, leaving the neighborhood in a state of utter panic. For over 20 years, the perpetrator was unknown. But in 2022, a rejuvenated cold case unit resumed the investigation. Meticulous detectives and forensic experts sought to reveal the long-concealed truth. They methodically re-interviewed old and new witnesses and evaluated forensic evidence. Finally, the murderer was found after 2 decades. How did the events of that fateful night unfold? What drove the investigators to bring this cold case back into the light of justice? Stay tuned as we uncover the truth. South Carolina's Greenville County is an energetic and crowded place. It has more residents than any other county in the state. Greenville houses the county seat, where crucial decisions are made. Greenville County's education emphasis sets it apart. The largest school district in South Carolina is Greenville County. Here, students study, grow, and plan for the future. Greenville County goes beyond school and choices. Natural beauty, including rolling hills and tranquil landscapes, is another draw. The community here is very friendly. However, tragedies can occur, even in this calm paradise. The town was haunted by the cold case of Sharon Anschutz, which remained unsolved for nearly 2 decades. Sharon Anschutz was born on October 19, 1945, by Leslie Franklin Kellogg and Leona Rosetta Shebester Prince. She grew up to be a powerful and determined person. Having been brought up in northern Michigan, she brought warmth and a Midwestern work ethic that left a lasting impression. Sharon Anschutz grew up in Michigan with sisters Gloria Hopkins, Sandra Sanders, and Leslie Kellogg, brothers Marjorie Perrin, Richard Kellogg, and Yvonne Tucker. Her childhood taught her work, kindness, and a desire to improve the world. On the precise date of July 12, 1966, at the tender age of 21, she gave birth to a son named Frank Anschutz. The relationship between her and her son is currently unavailable to the public. In her mid-40s, Sharon moved to Greenville, South Carolina, where she settled and had other children. She had a daughter named Christina Strodes, and 2 other sons, Walter Anschutz and Michael Anschutz. She worked at John Butler Dry Cleaners on Easley Bridge Road, which would later provide the setting for a sad event. The small dry cleaners on Easley Bridge Road were familiar to locals. It was a community hub where neighbors interacted while dropping off or picking up their laundry. At the heart of this facility was 54-year-old Sharon Anschutz, noted for her friendly smile and hard work. Raised in Michigan, she lived in Greenville and was loved by the community. Unfortunately, Sharon was shot and killed in a dry cleaner robbery on June 5, 2000. This tragedy forever changed Greenville County. For over 2 decades, Sharon's murderer was unknown. Join us as we explore Sharon Anschutz's life, a narrative of love, tragedy, and justice that is entwined with Greenville County. Greenville, a peaceful town in South Carolina's upstate, was shocked by a horrible murder that would last for decades in 2000. A fatal tragedy occurred at the John Butler Dry Cleaners on Easley Bridge Road on June 5th in the late twilight of a summer day. Dry cleaners prepared to close as the sun set, producing lengthy shadows on the quiet streets. Sharon, as usual, organized the counter. She had no idea this regular evening would turn dark. On that evening, there was an unexpected presence among the regulars and friends. A 44-year-old man had been to the dry cleaners. He sometimes did odd duties around the shop, like putting out the trash. On this fateful evening, his goals were not innocent. The man planned to loot the dry cleaners. He silently observed the business's operations, waiting for the right opportunity. Each work he undertook in the days before the crime brought him closer to his evil goal. He approached Sharon for criminal purposes. Sharon defended herself and her dry cleaning business against a horrific ordeal. The conflict concluded with a gunshot that echoed through the community for years. A gunshot broke the calm of that fateful night. A senseless act of violence killed lovely Sharon Anschutz. A life of hard work and kindness ended cruelly when she was shot in the back. The enormity of the situation became apparent as the gunshot faded. Realizing the gravity of his acts, the murderer departed, leaving shock, terror, and sadness. Sharon lay behind the counter, tragically killed in a place where she had provided so much happiness. That night's tragedy shocked the neighborhood. A customer found her dead and reported to 911 around 1:30 p.m. Once a warm and comforting location, the dry cleaners became a gloomy reminder of the darkness to be found, even in the most unexpected places. Sharon's family, friends, and co-workers mourned her steadfastness and work ethic. Local officials launched an aggressive probe while the murderer was on the run. They wanted to bring Sharon's attacker to prison, give her mourning family closure, and prevent such a horrific act from happening in their neighborhood. The Sharon Anschutz murder probe stalled despite their best efforts. Hudgens had escaped capture in the darkness. After the June 2000 John Butler Dry Cleaners tragedy, Greenville County was in shock and sadness. The community's beloved Sharon Anschutz was murdered, and justice needed to be done. The early investigation into this horrible murder showed law enforcement's determination and the community's hopeful search for answers. The inquiry began when first responders arrived. Sharon Anschutz was found dead behind the dry cleaner's counter. The Greenville County Sheriff's Office immediately began a manhunt for the offender. The crime scene was painstakingly searched for evidence, and nearby witnesses were interviewed. It was obvious from the start that solving this case would take relentless persistence. The lack of a suspect was a major issue for the detectives early in the case. Sharon was murdered in the dark, leaving few clues. However, the likelihood of a heist shaped the inquiry. Early witness testimony suggested the intruder planned to loot the dry cleaners. Sharon Anschutz appeared to have been robbed violently while trying to protect herself and her job. This revelation complicated the case as authorities sought to identify the perpetrator of this terrible violence. The early investigation required thorough evidence collecting and analysis to find clues. Every inch of the crime site was searched for the clues of the offender. Investigators searched for fingerprints, DNA, and other physical evidence that could lead to a breakthrough. Witnesses at the dry cleaners were questioned. Their testimony was essential, revealing key events before and after the crime. They recounted Sharon Anschutz's terrifying encounter with her attacker, revealing that night's events. While law enforcement investigated, Greenville County mourned. Sharon Anschutz, who impacted many lives, was mourned by her friends, family, and workplace. Once a place of joy, the dry cleaners now carried the sadness that had occurred within. As the inquiry continued, the community supported Sharon's family and pledged to seek justice. Their resolve was important to the case's resolution. The case stalled as leads cooled and witnesses became harder to find. The killer of Sharon remained a mystery, but her loved ones remembered her. Law police and community support initially helped, but later it ended up in the cold case files. Each day leads dwindled, witnesses left, and the perpetrator's trail grew colder. Sharon's family, friends, and community suffered as the investigation stalled. For over 2 decades, the perpetrator of this horrible crime was unknown. Sharon Anschutz lives on as a victim, a symbol of endurance and hope. The hope was that justice would prevail and the truth would be revealed. The Sharon Anschutz cold case haunted Greenville County, South Carolina for over 2 decades. Sharon Anschutz, a valued community member, was murdered, leaving a permanent wound. This long dormant probe was revived in the summer of 2022 by a renewed quest for justice. The summer 2022 launch of the newly revamped Greenville County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit was the tipping point. In 2020, Sheriff Hobart Lewis developed a dedicated unit to investigate unresolved cases, like the Sharon Anschutz cold case. His goal was to revive old investigations, evaluate evidence, re-interview witnesses, and use new investigative methods. This dedicated section renewed the quest for justice for unsolved crime victims. It promised the community that no case would be forgotten, and no stone would be left unturned in the search for answers. The Sharon Anschutz cold case reinvestigation began by contacting witnesses to the June 2000 dry cleaners incident. Witnesses with faded memories were confronted. Their accounts were vital to reconstructing the crime and the assailant's activities. These additional interviews illuminated the night's occurrences. Witnesses shed light on Sharon Anschutz's murderer's meeting. Although aged, their memories were crucial to the mystery. Early in the case, forensic evidence and technology were limited. However, forensic science advanced over time. This allowed the reinvestigation team to evaluate evidence using cutting-edge methods. Using current methodologies, forensic specialists methodically examined crime scene material to find new details. DNA, fingerprint, and ballistic testing were repeated. It was tiring, but it led to a breakthrough. As the investigation continued, new leads emerged, and old clues were re-examined. Re-interviewed witnesses revealed the assailants' intentions that night. The horrific events at the dry cleaners were re-evaluated to be a planned robbery gone wrong. This revealed more about the crime to detectives. Investigators also examined the links of 2008 deceased key suspect Roger Keith Hudgens. The dry cleaners knew Hudgens from the neighborhood. His establishment ties and witness accounts illuminated the murderer's occurrences. The Sharon Anschutz cold case breakthrough came from hard effort, new interviews, and sophisticated forensic analysis. In early January 2023, investigators confirmed that 44-year-old Roger Keith Hudgens killed Sharon Anschutz. Witness accounts and forensic evidence illuminated that fateful night. Hudgens planned to rob the dry cleaners, and horrible events occurred with this effort. No one was arrested in the Sharon Anschutz cold case. The investigation found Hudgens as the offender, but he died in 2008. It answered community questions and gave the victim's family closure. Even though Hudgens was never prosecuted, the crime and its aftermath will always be connected with him. Years of investigation, law enforcement, and community dedication to the truth culminated in the case's resolution. No arrest was made, but the story shows that a community can solve even the most difficult cold cases. After 2 decades of ambiguity, Greenville County was ready for the Sharon Anschutz cold case trial. Justice had led to discoveries that would be tested in court. It was a trial that would bring closure to the bereaved and demonstrate law enforcement and community devotion to justice. Chief suspect Roger Keith Hudgens was on trial. His acts from that fateful night in June 2000 were being pushed to the legal forefront, notwithstanding his 2008 death. Hudgens, a local man known to the dry cleaner's staff, was involved in Sharon Anschutz's fatal heist. The prosecution would use witness testimony and forensic evidence against Hudgens. Witness statements revealed the crime's motive, a planned heist. It was difficult to link Hudgens to the crime. Anticipation filled the courtroom as the trial began. The prosecution methodically marshaled witnesses' accounts of that awful night. They vividly described Sharon Anschutz and Hudgens' meeting before the crime. The case hinged on the reinvestigated forensic evidence. Ballistic specialists testified that Hudgens' weapon was used in the murder. His DNA at the crime scene helped his criminal case. Presented with compelling evidence, the defense moved to discredit the prosecution. They doubted witness testimony, claiming time had clouded memory. They also questioned the evidence chain of custody to stir doubt. The community felt the trial emotionally. Sharon Anschutz's family, friends, and co-workers attended for closure and justice. The courtroom was sad and determined. Legal teams saw the trial as the conclusion of years of investigation and truth-seeking. It was a chance to honor Sharon Anschutz and bring justice to her family. The moment of truth came after weeks of legal proceedings, discussions, and reflection. The jury decided Hudgens' guilt or innocence. Roger Keith Hudgens was convicted unanimously of murdering Sharon Anschutz. The courtroom echoed the verdict, which brought Sharon's family closure and validated law enforcement's and the community's dedication to justice. Hudgens, though dead, will be remembered for his senseless crime that scarred the town. Roger Keith Hudgens' sentencing began after his conviction. The prosecution wanted justice and a sentence that fit the crime. In contrast, the defense requested mercy, citing Hudgens' death and lack of criminal background. Posthumously, the judge sentenced Hudgens. The court proceedings ended when Hudgens was held responsible for that night's tragedy. The symbolic sentence sends a powerful message of justice. The Sharon Anschutz cold case trial was a monument to a community's tenacity in solving a cold case. It proved that truth and justice might endure. After the courtroom closed, Sharon Anschutz's legacy carried on in people who had sought closure for 2 decades. Some criminals become immortalized in the minds of those affected by their crimes. In the Sharon Anschutz cold case, Roger Keith Hudgens' life was entwined with Greenville County's most horrific incident. Greenville County was familiar to Roger Keith Hudgens. Hudgens was born September 13, 1955, was well known locally. He was known for his attendance at John Butler Dry Cleaners, where the cold case began throughout the years. Hudgens did odd tasks at the dry cleaners. He occasionally took out the trash, which would be part of the sad events of that June 2000 night. The reinvestigation revealed a planned robbery. Witnesses that night corroborated Hudgens' plan to rob the dry cleaners. The illicit scheme turned into a violent encounter that killed Sharon Anschutz. Roger Keith Hudgens died on February 17, 2008. He died of medical issues, leaving a legacy characterized by his years-old violent deed. His death ended any legal action against him, as he would never face justice. Hudgens' name remained tied to the Sharon Anschutz cold case after his death. The case was resolved after his posthumous identification as the offender. He would never be held accountable, but his name and actions would long be connected with justice. The redesigned Greenville County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit reopened the Sharon Anschutz cold case in the summer of 2022 and pursued the truth. They identified Roger Keith Hudgens as the perpetrator of the June 2000 tragedy after extensive investigation. Although Hudgens died in 2008, the resolution closed the case and showed a community's dedication to justice. A sorrowful chapter ended with the Sharon Anschutz cold case, but a new one began with determination, commemoration, and the legacy of a lady whose community impact will never be forgotten. Sharon Anschutz's tale shows that unity and a commitment to truth and justice can resolve Greenville County's most difficult situations. The Sharon Anschutz cold case closure shows Greenville County's resilience towards uncertainty. Law enforcement's passion, persistence, and never-ending pursuit of justice marked the way. Sharon Anschutz symbolized resilience and justice when this cold case was resolved. Her narrative shows that a community can handle even the most challenging issues. In closing, we leave you with 2 enduring questions. How can a community heal after enduring 2 decades of unanswered questions? And what lessons can we draw from this remarkable journey of resilience and pursuit of justice? For more real crime stories, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. You can also suggest a story for us to discuss. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Take care till the next time, and remember that we're all on the same quest for the truth.